Hey guys, how you doing you all? In this video we are going to see part 1 of what if Ash was actual smart and caught more Pokemon early. And please do check out story named Rising Ash, an anime rewrite by Anarchy Gale. And make sure to leave a like, share and subscribe. Let's get into the video. And Nidorino begins the battle strong with a horn attack. Camera zoomed in on a battlefield setting as a stout, pink-hued creature somewhat resembling a cross between a rhinoceros and a jackrabbit lunged forwards, aiming the pointed horn on its forehead directly at its foe, an almost spherical creature that seemed to be made of shadows and gas. The second creature leapt back, almost dancing as it hopped back and forth to evade its attacker's ferocious onslaught before holding out its hands as it seemed to emit waves of mysterious energy. Oh, but Gengar bounces right back. And there it is folks, the hypnosis power of Gengar at work. The pink creature, identified as Nidorino, braced itself as the energy passed over its body, wobbling on its feet slightly before seemingly falling asleep right there on the spot. Almost immediately, a beam of red light shot out from the side of the battlefield, seeming to absorb the Nidorino and removing it from sight as the Gengar cackled in delight. Wait, the trainer recalls Nidorino. Which Pokemon will he use now, folks? As the red beam retracted back to its source, the camera panned to show a shadowed figure on the sidelines of the battlefield, who quickly stowed the spherical device he was holding before pulling out a second, shown as a two-toned ball of some sort in green and white. He quickly tossed the ball onto the battlefield, where upon impact it burst open in a shower of light, allowing a truly gargantuan, snake-like creature made of pure stone towered over the battlefield. Oh, it's Onix. Now this giant Pokémon's on the attack, but Gengar jumps to the side. Yes, go Gengar, a young man cried out, pumping his fists as he stood in his room, watching the seemingly one-sided bout on his small television screen. Ash Ketchum grinned in excitement, his hat turned backwards, shoes laced tight, gloves fastened securely to his hands, as though he were ready for an epic journey to begin at that very minute, one that would define his life for years to come. Tomorrow is the day I'm finally able to get my trainer's license. Ash said to himself, seemingly psyching himself up. I will journey to gain the wisdom of the world through Pokemon training, and I hereby declare to the Pokemon of the world, I will become a true Pokemon master. Turning, Ash grabbed a ball from his desk, one that looked very similar to those he'd just seen used on the TV. Ash Ketchum, Pokemon Master. Ash, get to bed. Gah! Ash cried, stumbling from his practiced victory pose and accidentally tossing the ball in his hand across the room, where it was caught by a middle-aged woman with long, reddish brown hair and a scowl on her still young face. In her hand, the ball opened up to reveal its inner workings as a clock, with a small bird-like creature on a spring cooing 11 times before falling silent. It's 11 o'clock. Young man, you should be asleep. Delia Ketchum scolded, and Ash wilted under her disapproving gaze. But Mom, tomorrow I begin my Pokemon journey. Ash protested. I can't sleep. Well then you should at least be getting ready, not watching these league exhibition matches all night. Delia sighed, snatching up Ash's TV remote and switching the channel. Here, Profe. Zurok has one of his info shows playing right now. Watch this, and then straight to sleep. Ash nodded dutifully. Okay Mom, goodnight. Good night, Ash. I love you. Love you too, Mom. And make sure to change into your pajamas. I've had enough of finding you sleeping in your clothes. Yes Mom. Ash awoke the next morning with a panicked gasp, breathing heavily before he glanced out of his bedroom window to find the sun already high in the sky. Oh no, he cried, leaping out of bed and pulling on his sneakers in a panicked rush. What time is it? Why didn't my alarm go off? He paused as he glanced to the floor across from his bed, where his clock lay in pieces, the bird inside letting out one last, sad chirp before falling silent. Oh, must have been a good dream, at least. Shaking himself out of his thoughts, Ash rushed out of his room, down the stairs, and out the front door, completely missing the plate of breakfast and the note left on the kitchen table for him, and the fact that his mom was missing. Instead he rushed down the empty, dirt roads of Pallet Town in a mad panic, begging to any power that would listen that at least one Pokemon would be left for him, regardless of which one it was. He'd take any. As he approached his destination, Ash slowed slightly to take in the large, cheering crowd surrounding the entrance, completely blocking his way in. Taking a breath, Ash gained a determined look and began gently pushing his way through, uttering an, "Excuse me," here and a, "Pardon me," there, and ignoring the looks of indignation sent his way. Finally, he managed to make it to the other side of the crowd, stumbling forward as he did so and running headlong into a young man with wildly spiked hair wearing a long, indigo blue shirt. "Hey, why don't you watch where you're Ash?" Ash blinked, looking up at the other person for a moment before his eyes widened in realization. Gary Oak, I haven't seen you in years," he cried. "And haven't I been better off for it?" Gary cried, laughing to himself. "Nice to see you turned up after all, just in time to see me." Pausing again, Gary pulled one of the spheres from his belt. "Well Ash, you snooze you lose I suppose. And you're WAAAAAY behind right from the start." "What do you mean?" Ash asked, glaring slightly in indignation as he got to his feet. "What I mean is, I have a Pokémon already, and you don't." Ash clenched his fist in frustration. "You got your first Pokémon already, huh?" Ash asked, feigning amazement as he forced himself to calm down. "That's right, loser," Gary taunted, spinning the ball on the tip of his finger. "And it's right inside this Pokeball." Ash made to respond, but jumped as the crowd behind him began to roar in celebration once again, with a squad of cheerleaders lined up in front chanting, "Let's go Gary! Let's go!" louder than anyone else. Gary smirked at Ash before turning to the crowd. "Thank you, my fans, thank you," he called, raising his arms and gaining even more cheers from the gathered crowd. "I promise to you now, I will become a great Pokémon master, and I'll make the town of Pallet known all around the world." Ash ground his teeth, but forced himself to take a breath. "Hey, Gary," he asked, waiting as Gary turned to him in confusion. "You think I could get a look at the Pokémon you chose?" Gary stared at Ash for a moment before letting out a bark of laughter. "None of your business," he shot back, seeming to snatch the ball away from Ash despite his lack of desire to take it. "Why would I tell my competition what I'm using? Not that you are any competition, that is. But if you'd been on time you'd see that I got the best Pokémon in there." Gary paused in his gloating to send a domineering smirk Ash's way, putting his Pokeball away. "It pays to have a grandfather in the business, you know." Ash sighed to himself as Gary turned and left, jumping into the back of a bright red convertible with a waiting driver and waving to the crowd as the car drove off. "Thank you all for coming out to see history in the making," he called. "Now I, Gary Oak, am off to learn the ways of the Pokémon trainer." Ash growled under his breath as he watched Gary drive away. "I'll show you," he muttered, startling as a much older, distinguished voice scared him out of his thoughts. "So you decided to show up after all, then?" Ash turned to see a taller, wizened man in a red polo shirt and pristine white lab coat stood before him, regarding him with an eye of scrutiny. "Oh," the young man cried, snapping to attention before the distinguished Pokémon professor. "Professor Oak, good morning. I'm here to start my journey today." "Your journey, Oak parroted, once more looking Ash up and down. "You look more ready to go back to bed, young man. I hope you're not planning to train Pokémon in your pajamas." Ash blinked, looking down to see he was, indeed, still dressed in his pajamas, and yelped in surprise. No, Professor. I just got a little messed up this morning because my alarm broke, and had to rush to get here. But please, believe me, I'm ready for a Pokémon." Oak regarded Ash for a moment longer before nodding, turning around. And starting the walk back up the path to his lab. "Very well," he allowed. "Follow me, please." Ash nodded, quickly falling into step behind the professor and doing what he could to focus even as he looked around. Countless Pokémon roamed Oak's many acres of land, no doubt caught by the many trainers the aging professor had provided with their own starter Pokémon. As the thought entered Ash's mind, he began hopping on his toes slightly, giddy with excitement. Oak led the young trainer hopeful up the stairs into a room lined with machines and monitors, none of which Ash knew the use of, and so he didn't spare them a second thought. What he did focus on, however, was the Pokeball diagnostics machine set in the floor before a large wall monitor, in which sat 3 marked Pokeballs. "Here you go, Ash," Oak said as he stopped at the side of the machine. "Make your choice." Ash approached the machine with a determined gaze. "I've thought long and hard about this," he said, and Oak blinked in surprise before smiling slightly. And I've decided that the Pokémon I want is this one. Squirtle. Ash picked up the Pokeball marked with Squirtle's name, holding it in the air and holding his breath as it opened, only to show that it was empty. Already taken by someone who was on time, I'm afraid, Oak said informatively, offering an apologetic smile. Oh, Ash muttered. I wish I hadn't overslept, but never mind. You don't always get your first pick, but a true master can work with any Pokémon. Oak again blinked in mild shock. So now I will choose as my Pokémon, Bulbasaur. Again, Ash selected the correctly marked Pokeball, raised it into the air, opened it up, and let out a cry of frustration when it too was revealed to be empty. That one was also taken by a kid who wasn't late, Oak informed him, somewhat saddened. Ash was displaying a surprising amount of maturity, and it seemed overly cruel to make this example of him so soon in his journey, but it was a lesson all trainers needed to be taught. Okay. Well, that's no problem, because my Pokémon will be Charmander. Again, the marked Pokeball was raised and opened. Again, it was empty, eliciting a sound of distress from Ash. Oak rubbed his chin in contemplation. The early bird gets the worm, it seems. Or in this case, the Pokémon. That one went to a promising but brash young trainer named Damien. Ash began, altering as he set the empty ball down again. Does that mean all the Pokémon are gone? He asked. Oak gave the young man an apologetic look, before glancing up in thought. Well, there is still one left, but... Ash jumped on the chance. Professor, please, I'll take it. Oak regarded Ash for a moment before smiling. Very well, I think you'll be able to manage this Pokémon. The professor paused, earning to press a button on a console and causing a fourth Pokeball to rise from the center of the diagnostics machine, this one simply marked with a lightning bolt sticker. I think I should warn you though. This last Pokémon does have a bit of an attitude. Ash simply gave Oak a determined look. I have to have a Pokémon, he started firmly. Even if it's extra work, even if it's dangerous, I'll put my best effort in to train it. Well, in that case, Oak muttered, holding the ball out and releasing the Pokémon within with a flash of white light. Ash watched in awe as, on the desk in front of him, a small Pokémon materialized. Yellow-furred with bright red cheeks, the Pokémon looked up at Ash curiously. Pika. Its name is Pikachu, Oak informed. Wow, it's so cute. Ash cried, reaching out to lift Pikachu gently. It's the best of all. You'll see, Oak muttered. As Ash smiled up at Pikachu, the small rodent gave an agitated growl of warning. Struggling within Ash's grip for a moment. It then began sparking dangerously. Pika, it growled. Ash blinked. Oh, sorry, do you want me to put you down? He asked, gently setting Pikachu back on the counter, much to the rodent Pokemon's surprise but ultimately its delight. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm Ash, and I'll be your trainer now. Pikachu regarded the trainer quietly. He was young, yes, and probably quite stupid. But he'd listened when told to put him down. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to go with this trainer, of course he wouldn't just listen to everything he was told. No, the boy would have to earn that. Oak watched as Pikachu gave a brief nod before settling on the edge of the counter, allowing Ash to gently pet it. Pikachu is also known as the electric mouse, and can use a variety of electric attacks in battle, he informed. Quickly recovering from his surprise. Ash beamed excitedly. Cool, he cried, causing Pikachu to start preening proudly. Oak chuckled. Shockingly so, he joked, before handing over a satchel of Pokeballs and a strange, red, rectangular object. Here are your Pokeballs, and this is your Pokédex. It'll let you learn about Pokémon as you encounter them, and it also acts as your trainer ID and access to your own personal account with my Pokémon Storage Center, the Oak Corral. Awesome, thanks Professor. Ash beamed, accepting the gifts. Well, we better get going. You coming, Pikachu? As he spoke, Ash turned to Pikachu and held up its Pokeball, causing the mouse to start growling again. Ash blinked. You don't wanna come? He asked sadly, before noting that Pikachu was glaring at its Pokeball angrily. Oh, you don't like the Pokeball? He watched as Pikachu looked at him and shook its head. Okay, you can walk with me then, if you want. He beamed, putting the ball away, and Pikachu instantly calmed. Oak watched as Ash walked out of the lab with Pikachu on his heels. That boy has instantly managed to calm a Pokémon that's been causing me issues for months, he thought. He's got potential. Ash stepped out of the main gates to Oak's lab and paused, gazing in shock at the small crowd that had gathered, all the neighbors and shopkeepers from his neighborhood having gathered to send him off. Right at the front of the crowd was his mom, clutching a backpack and looking to him with watery eyes. "Mom," he asked. "Oh Ash," Delia sighed, smiling proudly. "I'm so proud of you. Finally about to fulfill your dream and start your journey. But, she paused, burying her face in the backpack as proud tears fell. "I'm going to miss you so much, my little boy." "Mom," Ash began, smiling sadly with tears forming in his own eyes before he blinked and looked down at Pikachu, standing by his side. "Pikachu?" it asked inquisitively. Delia recovered quickly, drying her eyes before opening the backpack and launching into one of her patented mom talks. "Now, I've packed your sneakers and jeans, nice clean shirts and underwear, and your favorite snacks and some hot chocolate in case you want something hot on a cold night. But be careful not to burn yourself. And a pair of rubber gloves to do your laundry, and a new clothesline to hang it to dry, and—" "Mom," Ash called, laughing slightly as his mom blinked at the sudden interruption. "Thank you so much, but you're embarrassing me showing off everything in front of everyone." He laughed. Delia smiled slightly. "I understand," she chuckled, before looking down at Pikachu, which had begun cleaning itself quietly. "That's your Pokémon?" she asked, gaining Pikachu's attention, who looked away in embarrassment at being caught. Ash laughed. "Yup, that's my new partner," he confirmed. "With Pikachu at my side I'm sure I'll be able to become a master in no time." "I thought all Pokémon stayed in their Pokeballs," Delia asked in confusion. "Why doesn't this one?" Pikachu glared up suddenly, growling angrily as it charged an electric attack. Ash's eyes widened as the lightning began to spark, quickly jumping in front of his mother. "Pikachu no!" he cried, reaching out to try and deter the electric mouse, only for Pikachu's Thundershock to leap directly into his hand, shocking him gray. TLY and causing him to let out a pained scream. Delia gasped in horror as Oak watched in utter shock. Soon realizing what had happened, Pikachu let up its attack, watching with worry and sadness as a shish collapsed onto the dirt path and convulsed as the electricity shook his body. Thinking quickly, Oak leapt forwards, grabbing Ash's wrists and planting his palms on the path, effectively grounding the boy. It took a few moments. But Ash quickly recovered, gasping for breath as he rested on the ground. He looked at his shaking hands, noting a web of burned scars across his palms and leading down his wrists and forearms. "Oh ouch," he stammered. "Ash," Delia cried in worry as Pikachu approached Ash slowly. I'm okay, Mom," Ash muttered, quickly pulling the long rubber gloves on to hide the markings. "Pikachu doesn't like being in the Pokeball, so I think he got upset when you mentioned putting him inside." "Oh," Delia muttered, looking at Pikachu, who was regarding her warily. "I'm sorry, Pikachu." Pikachu folded its ears back sadly. "Pika," Ash smiled. "I think Pikachu's saying he's sorry too." Delia smiled as Pikachu gave a short nod. "Well that's okay then," she allowed, looking to Ash. "Now we'll let you be on your way, but please remember to change your underwear, every single day." Ash blinked before blushing furiously. "Mom," after quickly borrowing Professor Oak's bathroom to change and treat his burns. Ash made his way out of Pallet Town onto Route 1 with Pikachu following behind. After a short walk, Ash stopped, turning to face Pikachu. "Wanna tell me what happened back there?" he asked, raising his brow at the electric rodent. Pikachu tilted his head at the trainer and opened its mouth wide, before shaking his head. "Right," Ash muttered. "Pokémon can't talk. Well if you don't mind. Can you try not to shock anyone anymore? That hurt." Pikachu's ears folded back in a look of shame before it turned around and ran up a tree, resting on one of the many branches. "Pikachu!" Ash cried, running up to the base of the tree. "Come on, Pikachu, I'm not mad. Please come down." Pikachu glanced at him before turning its back indignantly. Ash sighed. "All right, I suppose we can rest here for a bit," he allowed, taking off his backpack and setting it on the ground against the tree as he looked around. "I wonder if there's any wild Pokémon around here." Searching the area for a moment, Ash smiled as he saw a small bird-like creature wander into the clearing, covered in brown and cream feathers and pecking at the ground. Ash pulled his Pokédex out and pointed it at the Pokémon. Flipping the lid as the device began talking. Pidgey, a flying-type Pokémon, the device began. Among all the flying-type Pokémon in Kanto, Pidgey is the gentlest and easiest to cap. Touray, a perfect target for the beginning trainer. Alright, Ash cried, quickly covering his mouth with his hands and crouching as the Pidgey looked around at the noise, waiting until it settled again. It's our lucky day, he continued in a quieter voice. Pikachu, come on. When no answer or action came, Ash looked up, spotting Pikachu still sat in the tree. Pikachu, he asked, only for the R. Odin to make a show of turning its back to him. Still upset, huh? Alright, I'll try myself this time. Producing an empty Pokeball from his belt, Ash fell into a ready stance. I pledge to become a Pokemon master. And to do that I need to train as many Pokemon as I can to hone my skills. It's time to take the next step on my journey. As he spoke, he stepped forward, gaining the Pidgey's attention. Enjoy your last day of freedom. Pidgey, cause your mind now. Pokeball, go. Quickly turning his hat backwards, Ash reeled his arm back before pitching the Pokeball through the air directly at the Pidgey. Scoring a direct hit and absorbing the bird into the ball in a flash of red light. He watched with bated breath as the ball hit the ground and shook violently, the creature within struggling against the device, before it burst open, the ball bouncing back to Ash's feet as the Pidgey re-materialized and spread its wings to flee. Ash frowned as his Pokédex piped up. To capture a Pokémon, you usually have to battle it with your own. Yeah well, Ash muttered, glancing at the tree where Pikachu was still sulking. I don't really have that option right now. Thinking for a moment, he retrieved his pajama shirt from his backpack, quickly closing it and suspending it from the tree by his clothesline when he spotted a Rattata in the distance, as the Pokédex noted their habit of MPTing to steal food from inexperienced trainers. Returning to the field, Ash searched for the Pidgey again, slowly creeping up behind it with his shirt at the ready. Waiting until he was positioned right behind the Pidgey, he then pounced. Covering the bird with his shirt and attempting to hold it down. Calm down, Pidgey, he cried, grunting with the effort of subduing the surprisingly strong bird. Before blinking as his shirt seemed to begin inflating. What the wah? With a cry of panic, Ash flew off his feet, traveling backwards several feet before landing hard on his rump. The force the landing knocked his Pokédex from his pocket, where it began speaking again. Pidgey can create small tornadoes with their Guat attack. They also have a sand attack. A what? Ash began, before sputtering as he was hit with a billowing cloud of dust and dirt that stung his eyes and filled his mouth with grit. Blah. Guess this isn't my lucky day. Standing to brush the majority of the dirt off of himself, Ash grit his teeth in frustration as a group of 3 Pidgey flew down to land nearby, as though taunting him. In a fit of frustrated anger, the young trainer grabbed a pebble from the ground and hurled it at the small flock, causing it to scatter as a 4th bird wandered into the clearing in the distance. Alright, Ash said to himself. This time you're mine, Pidgey. Get ready to taste my rock throw attack. With that and a grunt of effort, Ash grabbed and hurled another stone at the bird in the distance, succeeding in hitting it in the back of the head and giving a whoop of victory at the sight. As the bird turned to face him, however, closer inspection revealed it was not in fact a Pidgey. Ash blanched as a thought occurred to him, something he had read a long time ago. It's not, is it? He asked himself, edging slowly towards the tree where Pikachu and his bag were. As he retreated, he once again pulled out his Pokédex. Spearow. Unlike Pidgey, a Spearow tends to have a terrible attitude. It is considered very wild in nature, and is prone to attacking other Pokémon and humans when provoked. Ash gulped heavily as he slid the dex into his pocket once more, looking up and watching the irritated Spearow in trepidation. He began, once more stepping back as the Spearow spread its wings. I'm very sorry, he offered lamely. The Spearow seemed to regard Ash for a moment, before letting out a shrill cry and taking wing, rising into the sky rapidly. Ash yelped in panic, scrambling to retrieve his bag and the line it hung from even as the Spearow took a flying arc and came bombing down upon him. In a panic, Ash dove onto the ground, landing heavily on his stomach and narrowly avoiding Spearow's head-on charge. Hey! The young trainer hopeful cried, jumping back to his feet. I said I was sorry, knock it off. He ducked as Spearow took another pass, yelping as the avian's claw nipped his shoulder. That's it, Pikachu. Pikachu glanced up, ear twitching at its name being called. Before turning his back again, Ash grumbled angrily. Fine, he cried. I'll do it myself. Turning, he searched the skies, having lost sight of the ornery avian for a moment. He quickly found it again. However, when it delivered a solid and painful peck to his head. Ow! Spearow flapped away, seemingly cackling before it noticed Pikachu in the tree. Its eyes narrowed at the sight of the electric rodent, and Ash gasped as the bird turned in the air, zeroing in on its new target. Beware! Dexter chimed in suddenly. Some wild Pokémon can become jealous at trained Pokémon and may attack. Oh no you don't! Ash cried, grabbing the first thing he could and throwing it at the Spearow with all his might. The Pokeball expanded midair, colliding with Spearo's underbelly right as it reached Pikachu and sucking the bird into itself with a flash of red. Ash blinked for a moment, watching in surprise as the orb fell to the ground and shook violently. After a moment it stopped, letting out a victorious chime as the glowing button in the middle of its face switched off. Ash stammered, lost in the heat of the moment. I caught it. Pikachu squeaked, hopping down from its branch to poke the ball curiously. Ash stood frozen for a second longer, before a manic grin spread to cover his face. I caught it, he said again, more confidently. I caught it. I caught Spearow. Rushing forward, Ash scooped the dormant ball off the ground and raised it triumphantly. Ya hear that, world? I caught a Spearow. Giggling with excitement, Ash began hopping from one foot to another as his declaration rang out across the plains. He soon froze, however, when the rustling of leaves in a nearby tree, accompanied by angry squawking, filled the air, with a flock of Spearow revealing themselves as the source soon afterwards. Ash shrugged his backpack on. We should run, he said to himself quietly, looking to Pikachu. Now, he added, before breaking into a panicked sprint with the electric rodent hot on his heels, soon followed by the flock as they let out a cacophony of angered and indignant cries. As they ran, Ash looked back at Pikachu, panting heavily. Don't worry Pikachu, he called, stumbling for a moment before getting his feet back under him. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. Chew. With a sudden burst of speed, Pikachu began to pull ahead, quickly leaving Ash behind as the Spearow closed in, attacking with furious pecks and scratches against Ash and Pikachu both. Ash grit his teeth as Pikachu fell to the ground, hitting its head and seeming to fall unconscious. Hey, leave him alone, he cried, charging through the frenzied flock and scooping Pikachu into his arms before once again making a run for it. Duckin'. Through a wall of bushes and shrubbery, Ash skidded to a halt on the other side, narrowly avoiding falling over the edge of a ravine into the rapid rivers below. However, with nowhere else to go and the flock of Spearow closing in, Ash took a deep breath, held Pikachu close, and readied himself. Here we go. With those words, Ash jumped, aligning his body feet first as he fell alongside a small waterfall and breaking the surface of the water easily, his entire body getting swept away by the current soon after. Still he held tight to Pikachu, even as a great blue sea serpent swept past them and sent them hurtling further down the river. Ash struggled in the water, trying to find which way was up, before spotting and grabbing hold of what looked like a small, pink fishing lure and pulling hard. Within moments, Ash found his whole body being pulled along once again, the light of day visible above as he rushed towards the surface of the water and broke through, practically flying out of the lake he'd arrived in and landing heavily on the embankment, coughing up what water he had swallowed. Ah, it's just a kid, a strange voice commented, and Ash glanced up to spot a young girl that looked about his age. Dressed in denim shorts, a yellow top, and red suspenders, with short-cut ginger hair tied upwards in a side ponytail. The girl gasped a second later and leapt towards him, crouching down. Oh, and a Pokémon. Are you okay? We've been better, Ash muttered, looking down at Pikachu and gently pressing 2 fingers against the Pokémon's neck, sighing in relief to find his partner was breathing. We got attacked by some wild Spearow, had to jump into the river to get away. Could you please tell me where we are? The girl blinked for a moment. Oh, well we're just south of Viridian City. Maybe an hour's walk, she muttered, before shaking her head. Oh, But you need to get there right away, your Pokémon's hurt. There's a medical center for sick Pokémon that can help your Pokémon. Ash nodded. I know. Thank you, he said as he stood, cradling Pikachu once more. He made to move, but froze as the familiar sound of angry wings caught his attention. Oh, he muttered, looking up into the distance to find the Spearow flock once more closing in on him. They're coming back. We've gotta run. Turning in a panic, Ash spotted what he assumed was the girl's bike and ran to it, placing Pikachu in the basket. I'm really sorry, but I need to borrow this, he cried, climbing on. Hey, the girl cried indignantly, running after Ash for a moment as he began pedaling away. My bike. I'll give it back in the city, Ash shouted over his shoulder, before turning to focus on the road as he pedaled frantically along the uneven dirt roads. As he broke out of the treeline, the clouds above seemed to turn dark. With thunder rumbling in the not-so-far distance as flashes of lightning arced across the clouds. Ash grit his teeth as he pedaled, distinctly aware of the Spearow closing in around him. Just hang on Pikachu, he whispered, ducking as one of the avian attackers dove at him. We're almost there. More and more the Spearow dove to attack, causing Ash to duck and dodge frantically. Not watching the road as he veered away from the well-worn path and began crossing grass once more, only to ride his borrowed bicycle over a high ridge and come crashing down with a mighty thud. Looking up, Ash saw his partner lay nearby and pushed through his own pain to crawl closer, placing a hand gently on Pikachu's side. Pikachu, Ash muttered, as tears built in his eyes. This can't be happening. Squawks and cries drew Ash's attention as the flock drew closer, and the young trainer narrowed his eyes in determination as he pulled out the lightning bolt-marked poke ball at his belt and placed it on the ground before standing up. Get in the ball, Pikachu, Ash ordered firmly, standing protectively over his partner. I know you don't like it, but it's the safest place for you now. So please, just this once, go inside so I can protect you. Pikachu watched as Ash knelt, picking up a handful of stones. Spearows of the wilds, Ash cried, taking one of the stones and hurling it into the flock to gain their full attention. Do you know who I am? I am Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town, and my destiny is to become the world's #1 Pokémon master. Pikachu pushed himself up slightly, watching in amazement as the Spearow circled around Ash, seemingly drawn to the boy and his aura of confidence. I can't be defeated by the likes of you, Ash went on, hurling another stone at the birds above him and eliciting a squawk of indignation. I've already caught one of you, and now I'll defeat the rest, do you hear me? Ash paused, looking back and frowning. Pikachu, go into the Pokeball, now, he ordered before returning his attention to the Spearow. Come and get me. Lightning struck in the distances, as one, the Spearow flock came together and aimed directly at Ash as the boy flung his arms out wide readily. Without even knowing what he was doing, Pikachu rushed forwards, clambering up Ash's back and leaping from his shoulder as a powerful bolt of lightning crashed down. Drawn to the rodent's tail and arcing up his body as he released the most powerful electric attack he'd ever used. Ka-chu. With a flash of blinding light, electricity filled the air, zapping and scaring away the Spearow with enough power to split the cloud layer above, clearing the skies as the sun began shining once more. Some time later, Ash and Pikachu awoke with a groan, their bodies hurting and their energy sapped. Ash noted with a touch of guilt that the bicycle they'd borrowed had been fried completely, and was now simply a mangled heap of metal and plastic. Still, he reasoned, it was better a broken bike than his life. Shaking his head, Ash looked up, blinking at the blinding sun above before his eyes focused. What is that? He asked aloud, at the sight of a large, bird-like shape flying across the sky, over the rainbow that had formed, and out of sight. There is no data, his Pokédex chimed in, having fallen from his pocket in the fight. There are still many unrecorded Pokémon. Picking Pikachu up gently, Ash smiled as the little Pokémon leaned up to lick his cheek, making his way slowly and achingly towards Viridian Sea. Ity in the distance in the hope of rest and medical care. Ash slowly made his way towards the outskirts of Viridian City, his whole body aching, his mind fighting the urge to lay down and rest. In the distance, the sound of a citywide broadcast filled the air, but the injured trainer ignored it and focused on keeping himself moving, one foot in front of the other. Right, left, right again. In his arms Pikachu stirred. letting out a whine of discomfort, and Ash spared his partner a saddened glance before steeling his resolve. His pain didn't matter right now. Pikachu needed help. With the last of his willpower, Ash broke into a measured jog, pacing himself while trying to get to his destination just a little faster. As he crested a small hill, a police checkpoint greeted his view, little more than a cylindrical stand with a road barrier blocking the path. Finally, Ash panted, stumbling over a loose stone before getting his feet under him again. "We made it. Hold it right there." Ash jumped, tripping and falling over his own feet to skid painfully to a stop at the barrier. He looked up slowly, groaning with the effort, and took a moment to blink his vision clear before taking eye. And the sight of the police officer before him, her teal hair tied back in her two-tone blue uniform pristinely pressed. "And just where do you think you're going with that Pokémon, young man?" the officer asked. "Please," Ash bit out, pushing himself to his knees before his strength finally gave out and he collapsed again. "Please, help us, my Pikachu, he's hurt." The officer blinked in surprise before snapping to action. "Oh my goodness," she cried out, kneeling to help Ash to his feet and walking him slowly around the small building to where a motorcycle and sidecar were parked. "Don't you worry. We'll get you both checked out as soon as possible." Gently, the officer helped Ash into the sidecar before making her way to the driver's position. "Do you have any ID with you so I can give the nurse your details?" Ash nodded, wincing as he reached into his pocket and produced his Pokédex. The officer took it from him, taking but a moment to check Ash's details before nodding to herself. "This is an emergency," she said, seemingly to herself. "Better get there as fast as possible." Ash frowned slightly in thought, fighting to stave off the black at the edges of his vision before yelling in fright as the motorcycle peeled out of its parking space and roaring down the road. With one arm wrapped tightly around Pikachu, Ash gripped the edge of the sidecar in fright. As they sped off, another young trainer, this one with short-cut ginger hair, coughed as she waved away the exhaust fumes. "Hey!" she cried indignantly, readjusting the mangled bicycle on her shoulder. "Oh, come on." With a sigh, she set off on a measured jog, balancing the wreck of what was once her bike across her shoulders. High above the city, a cat-like hot air balloon hovered, its passengers looking out upon the sleepy suburbs in contemplation. As they passed over a police checkpoint, the blue-haired male of the group lowered a fishing line, snagging the wanted poster posted on the notice board and bringing it into the basket to scrutinize. "A wanted poster, how flattering," the magenta-haired woman of the group mused, flicking her long hair out into her signature back-shooting style. "Flattering," the man gasped. "This picture makes me look terrible." "Then you should be happy," the woman joked. "They managed to capture the real you, Tilda." "Exactly." The woman chuckled darkly to herself. "We'll show these bumpkins." The man nodded. "The people of Viridian City will be sorry they ever saw this face." As the two laughed to themselves, a third voice piped up, as a small cat-like creature tapped its foot impatiently. "We're all sorry for your face, Nirth Tilda," it scolded. "Now don't you two forget, we're here to steal all the Pokémon we can." Nirth Tilda. The man and woman paused in their laughing, answering as one. "Absolutely. But of course." The creature smiled to itself as it turned to look out of the basket once more. "And remember, I'm the top cat." Nirth Tilda. The man rolled his eyes. "You got it," he replied mockingly. As night fell on Viridian City, Ash struggled with himself to remain conscious. Buildings and trees whipped by faster than he could register, with the police officer taking twists and turns to get him to the medical center as fast as she could. It was all he could do to avoid losing what little lunch he'd eaten that day. "There it is," the officer cried as she turned down one final, long road. Speeding towards a large building in the distance, its roof styled like a Pokeball. "Pokémon Center," Ash muttered, reading a sign as it whipped by. Finally. "This is tricky," the officer said out loud. Twisting the throttle again, Ash blinked as the bike seemed to speed up as they got closer to the building. "Hold on." As the front of the bike collided with the steps leading to the building, Ash cried out in a mixture of shock, fear, and pain, his body jolting as he held on tightly. The bike hit the ground heavily, spinning madly and skidding through the automatic wide opening front doors to stop just before the front desk. "We do have a driveway, you know," the nurse manning the desk scolded as she stood up, before letting out a cry of shock as she spotted both Ash and Pikachu in the sidecar. "It's a medical emergency," the officer cried. "This boy and his Pokémon have been injured badly. Please," Ash managed to get out, trying to stand. "Please, help, Pikachu." The nurse nodded, her expression turning serious as she turned to the monitor and a microphone on her desk. "Emergency," she said into the microphone. "I need 2 stretchers immediately. 1 small electric Pokémon, 1 young trainer. Stat." As she spoke, she began typing on the computer, taking the Pokédex from the officer and plugging it into a slot in the base. Ash saw a small team of round, pink-hued Pokémon come rushing from the back of the center, pushing 2 stretchers, before he finally lost his ongoing battle and blacked out. Ash awoke with a groan of discomfort, the sound of a CL. Awk chiming in the distance having stirred him. He looked down to find himself in a hospital bed, somehow changed into his pajamas with a number of bandages wrapped around his body. "Ah, welcome back, Mr. Ketchum." Ash blinked, turning slightly to see the pink-haired nurse from before stood over his bed. He croaked, wincing at the pain in his throat. Hi. The nurse smiled kindly. "Don't try to speak," she said gently. "You've been through a lot, from what I can tell. Your clothes were soaked through, so Chansey changed you into the pajamas you had in your bag." Ash blinked again, turning to spot one of the round, pink creatures from before. "Thank you," he whispered, coughing a little into his hand before trying to sit up with a wince. "Well," the nurse said. "I see you're well enough to move, at least. Thankfully the worst of your issues came down to pure exhaustion, but you should still take it easy, that was a lot of wounds you came in with." "What on earth happened?" As he settled into a sitting position, Ash nodded, launching into the retelling of his endeavors to capture a Pokémon on Route 1 and the attack he'd suffered afterwards. He couldn't help but smile when talking about his first capture. Before blinking as something dawned on him. "Hey," he said, looking around. "Where is my Spearow?" The nurse smiled gently. "When Chansey got you changed, she brought your Spearow to me. I've treated both him and your Pikachu, though Pikachu is going to need more rest so it can recharge. Like you, it was exhausted, so I have it linked to a battery to replenish its electric cheek sacs." Ash nodded, leaning back against the head of his bed. "Thank you," he sighed, finally managing to relax for a moment before a thought occurred to him. "Say, do you have a phone I can use?" he asked. "I should really give my mom a call." The nurse smiled again, nodding graciously. "Of course," she answered. "There's a bay of public-use video phones in the lobby. If you're feeling well enough, you're welcome to take a walk and use them." Ash smiled. "Thank you. I think I will." The nurse nodded again and stood. "Very well," she said. "We'll leave you be. If you need anything, just call." With one more set of thanks, Ash rested a moment as the nurse moved away with her Chansey helper before shifting to stand slowly. He let out a sigh of relief as he adjusted to his own weight again, slowly regaining his strength as he took the time to change into his clothes once more. When he finally made his way back into the main lobby, Ash took a moment to look around properly, having overlooked the area upon arriving. With a large, open entryway leading up to the main desk, the area seemed rather generic for a medical center. Multiple waiting areas lined the outer edge of the room, and multiple corridors lead deeper into the center, both to medical areas and hostel residences for traveling trainers. Along one of the far walls, Ash noticed a small grouping of booths, each one containing a large green terminal complete with screen and handset. With a quick glance at the clock telling him it was only 8:15 in the evening, he made his way to the videophones and sat down in an empty booth, dialing before picking up the handset. "Hello," his mother's voice asked soon enough. "Ketchum residence, who's speaking please?" "Hi Mom," Ash began, wincing as a pitched sound came out of the handset before the screen in front of him blinked on, showing a picture of his mother. "Hi honey, Mrs. Ketchum said cheerily. "Is everything okay? Where are you right now, Ash?" "I'm at the Viridian Pokémon Center." Ash's mom blinked before beaming proudly. "You're already in Viridian City," she cried. "It took your father 4 days to get there when he first started Pokémon training. Oh, he'd be so proud, you're like the apple of his eye." Ash sighed dejectedly. "Maybe a rotten apple," he offered. "What do you mean? Mom, I didn't even make it a day before my Pokémon had to be rushed to the hospital, and me along with him." I'm a terrible trainer. Mrs. Ketchum stared at Ash through the screen for a moment before sighing. Well, you look okay now, she offered. And you managed to get yourselves there, I'd say that's pretty good. Did you manage to catch anything before you got into trouble? Ash nodded slightly. Yeah, a Spearow. A Spearow. Mrs. Ketchum parroted, her eyes wide in shock. Ash, honey, those are notoriously rowdy and difficult Pokémon to catch. Well done. Ash blushed slightly. Hey, thanks Mom, he muttered. Well, I just thought I'd check in with you. To let you know I got here safe. I'll let you go now, I'm sure you're getting ready for bed soon, right? Mrs. Ketchum nodded. I am sweetie, but thank you for calling, I would have worried otherwise. She said with a smile. And think about calling Professor Oak too, he'll want to know about your progress. I'm sure he'll be proud of you too. Ash smiled. I will, thanks Mom. Love you, good night. Good night Ash. I love you too. Ash set the receiver down, watching as the call cut out before dialing again. As the phone rang, he looked around once more, suddenly noticing a large mural of 4 strange Pokémon above the main desk. Soon enough, Professor Oak's voice spoke from the receiver. Hello. Who's calling please, I was just about to have a late dinner. Professor Oak. Ash answered, it's Ash. I just wanted to check in and let you know where I was. Oh, Oak cried, and suddenly his picture appeared on the monitor just as Mrs. Ketchum's had beforehand. Ash my boy, good to see you again. Where might you be calling from? Viridian City, Professor, I'm at the Pokémon Center. Splendid. Why you've done rather well, getting to Viridian City so quickly. I'm Mew. Saint admit I had a little wager going with my grandson. You see Gary said you'd spend a week before you got to Viridian, but here you are on your first day. I can't wait to see the look on his face when I tell him. Ash chuckled. Yeah, that'd be pretty funny, he agreed, before a thought occurred to him. Say, did Gary say anything about me catching a Pokémon? Why yes, actually. Oak confirmed. He bet me $1 million that you wouldn't catch a single Pokémon before Viridian, and I took him up on it. Ha ha. Ash smirked. Well Professor, you can claim your winnings, because I caught a Spearow. He bragged, grinning proudly. And tell Gary that money isn't everything for a trainer, from me. Oak barked out with laughter, shaking his head in his mirth. Fantastic my boy, fantastic. You must let me see this Spearow as soon as you can. Ash nodded. Nurse Joy's treating it right now, along with Pikachu, but I'll ask her to send you its data when she can. Fantastic. Ash paused for a moment, glancing back at the mural. Say, Professor, can I ask you something about a Pokémon I saw? Oak blinked, his expression turning inquisitive. Of course you can Ash, ask away. Nodding, Ash took a moment to gather his thoughts. Well, just after the storm earlier today, I thought I saw a large bird Pokémon flying past. But this was really big, and it flew right over the rainbow. Oak rubbed his chin in thought. Over the rainbow, you say? He mused. Well that doesn't sound like any Pokémon I've ever heard of, but then there are plenty of Pokémon out there that we know nothing about yet. I'll certainly make a note of that and look into it, but I'm afraid I don't know anything about it. Ash hummed and nodded. Well, okay. Thanks anyway, Professor. Not to worry, Ash, Oak reassured him. Like I say, there are many Pokémon yet to be discovered. He paused as the sound of a doorbell sounded from a distance behind him. Ah, my pizza's here. I'll have to talk to you another time Ash, best of luck in your travels. I'm coming. And with that, Oak rushed off screen. Ash laughed to himself as he set the handset down, standing to take another brief walk and maybe find the nurse again before he froze. Coming out of the hostel area of the center was a very familiar-looking ginger-haired girl, and Ash realized with a twinge of guilt that he didn't have a bike to return to her. Oh, the girl cried out as she turned to face him. There you are. Ash panicked as she started to approach him, looking around for an escape. Oh, hey, look, I'm sorry but. Don't worry about it, the girl said, cutting him off. I admit, I was pretty ticked off when I found my bike destroyed in the woods. She trailed off, and Ash felt a bead of nervous sweat roll down his face. But when I got here and heard about how hurt you were, well, it just didn't seem that important, you know. Ash blinked, taking a deep breath and letting it out in a relieved sigh. Thank you, he said, smiling nervously at the girl. I honestly feel really bad about your bike, and I was worried you were gonna be real mad and start following me around for a new one. The girl pulled a face of confusion. Why would I do that? She asked incredulously. You didn't exactly plan to wreck my bike, and I already know you were having an emergency. Honestly, that just sounds childish. The two trainers stared at each other for a moment before breaking into a fit of giggles. I'm Ash, by the way. Ash Ketchum. Misty Waterflower. Nice to meet you, Ash. The two trainers smiled, shaking hands before the sound of the doors to the emergency care ward opening behind them caught their attention. They turned to the doors, spotting Nurse Joy walking out pushing a stretcher where Pikachu lay, a small battery attaché to his cheeks and a headband with a bulb around his head, flickering dimly. Nurse Joy! Ash cried, rushing over to the stretcher with Misty following behind him. Your Pikachu will be just fine, now, Joy said, giving a reassuring smile. He's just resting now and should be right as rain in the morning, fully charged and ready to go. Ash let out another sigh of relief. Thank goodness, he muttered, before looking up again. And my Spearow. Right here, Joy said cheerily, pulling a Pokeball from beneath the stretcher and handing it over. Spearow just needed a little attention, so it's all fine now. Ash smiled as he took the Pokeball, hooking the orb to his belt. Thank you very much, he said, before leaning down to Pikachu. You rest up, buddy. No rush. Joy smiled at the boy as he backed away, moving towards the recovery ward. Thank goodness for the Pokémon Center, Ash. Misty asked, nudging Ash's arm with a grin. Yeah, Ash chuckled, ready to turn in for the night before. A siren began ringing throughout the center. Your attention please. A voice called through the speakers around the city. A gang of criminals had been spotted in the Viridian city borders. All citizens, please stay indoors. Ash blinked owlishly for a moment. Wow, the cops must be pretty good around here, he mused, before yelling out in shock as Misty tackled him to the ground. Hey, what gives? He cried. Shish, Misty hissed, ducking behind the counter as the sound of shattering glass from above rang out and two Pokeballs clattered onto the ground. Pokémon centers are likely targets for thieves, she explained in a whisper when Ash looked at her in shock. And I thought I saw a shadow moving above us. They must have some kind of aircraft. Two bursts of light signaled the Pokeballs releasing the Pokémon within. And a cloud of black smoke filled the room soon after. Who are they? Ash asked quietly, peeking over the counter to try and spot the thieves. Two figures lowered through the shattered skylight on a rope. A man and a woman, and began reciting a motto of some kind. To protect the world from devastation. To unite all people within our nation. To denounce the evils of truth and love. To extend our reach to the stars above. Jesse. James. Team Rocket blasts off at the speed of light. Surrender now, or prepare to fight. MEWTH, that's right. Ash stared at the three figures stood in the foyer of the center and blinked in confusion. Did you rehearse that? He finally asked. Did that Meowth just talk? Misty chimed in as she too peeked over the counter. Never mind that. The woman shouted, stalking forward. We're here for the Pokémon, now hand them over. Ash's bewildered state quickly changed to a determined scowl as he stood and leapt over the counter. You're not getting Pikachu, or any other Pokémon here, he declared firmly. That's right, Misty chimed, hopping over the counter herself. People like you should be ashamed of yourselves. The man smirked. Ah, seems we have a couple of little protectors to deal with, Jesse, he said mockingly. That we do, James, Jesse agreed with a vicious grin. We're not interested in your little electric rat, boy. We only want rare and valuable Pokémon. James explained, twirling a rose between his fingers. I'm sure there's one or two gems stored here among the common junk. Ash grit his teeth angrily. You're really starting to bug me, he bit out. Isn't that cute, Tilda? Jesse teased. The boy's bugged. James mocked. Then let's squash him. Meowth cackled, and on cue Team Rocket's Pokémon charged forwards. A floating purple ball that seemed the source of all the smoke alongside a purple snake with harsh yellow markings. Ash and Misty yelped, ducking under the attack and bolting for one of the side doors. Beckoned by Nurse Joy, the villain's Pokémon crashed into the consoles behind where they had just been stood, tearing the wiring apart and sending sparks flying before giving chase. Ash and Misty followed Joy closely, ducking into a side room filled with rows upon rows of Pokeballs. Not long after, everything went dark. The lights, Misty cried, panting. They must have cut the power, Joy mused. Moving away from the door. Luckily for us we have a backup generator, Pika Power, engage. Ash and Misty looked around as the lights flickered back on, looking in to a side room behind a thick wall of glass to find a group of Pikachu running on a large treadmill, sparks flying from their cheeks into a radar dish above them. Wow, Misty gasped in amazement, her attention soon pulled away as a computer blinked to life and began speaking. Crisis protocol engaged. Initiating emergency transport sequence, Pewter City connected. Quick, guard the door. Joy barked. Manning the terminal as a grabber arm began picking Pokeballs from the shelves and feeding them into another machine. Ash nodded, rushing for the door just as it burst inwards and Team Rocket's coughing came barreling through, crashing into the shelves and scattering Pokémon all over the ground. Grab them, Misty cried, diving to the ground and frantically gathering as many Pokeballs as she could. We need to fight back, Ash. Come on. Ash stood frozen, his eyes wide as a sea of shining light blinded him. Shaking his head, he looked back and saw instead a floor littered with Pokeballs. Still flowing slightly but not as bright. From his belt, however, he could almost hear an angry chirping, and one of his Pokeballs seemed to almost vibrate on its perch. With a determined scowl, Ash grabbed the ball off his belt and tossed it. Spearow, go, he cried, and his first official capture burst from the Pokeball with a cry of defiant fury. Team Rocket's Ekans reared up as Spearow dove, hissing in an attempt to intimidate the small bird. Spearow however ignored it, driving its beam into the snake's underbelly at full speed and sending it skidding back to Jessie's feet as the crimson-haired criminal stepped into the room. How dare you? Jessie cried indignantly. Easily, Ash shot back, before holding an arm out to stop Misty as she too prepared to throw a Pokeball. Not that one, he told her, pointing to another on the ground at her feet. It's empty. Throw that one instead. Misty blinked before nodding, scooping up the indicated Pokeball and tossing it, releasing a stout pink creature with large ears and a menacing horn. Nidorino! It cried, pawing at the ground and snorting angrily. Misty blinked in surprise, looking at Ash. How did you? She mumbled before shaking her head. No time for that. Nidorino. Use double kick. Coughing, tackle. James ordered. The Nidorino snorted again and charged forwards at the same time as James's coughing, spinning on its foreleg. Before striking out with its hind legs and sending the floating orb Pokémon flying back to strike James in the face. Spearow, dive and use peck on coughing. Ash cried, and the bird let out a battle cry as it complied. Throwing its full body weight into a beak-first attack against the Pokémon, driving it and James back into the corridor. Ash pumped his fist in victory, but blinked as he realized somebody was missing. Hey, where's your Meowth? He demanded, holding his arm out as Spearow fluttered back, the bird pausing a moment before alighting on the offered perch. Right here, Nyarth, the cat-like Pokémon called out, standing on the edge of Pikachu's stretcher with his claws out. Surrender right now, or the rat gets it. He threatened. Why you? Ash growled, before sighing. Fine, just leave Pikachu alone. Good thinking, Meowth, Jessie praised. Now bag the Pokémon and let's get out of here. On it, Jessie, James said, moving back into the room as he rubbed his head sorely. That's right, Meowth bragged. I'm the top cat around here, Nyarth. He grinned and chuckled to himself, turning around to taunt Pikachu some more, and blinked. Hey, were there always two of you? Ash smirked. Pikachus. He cried out, and a swarm of electric mice began pouring out from the emergency generator room, crowding around Team Rocket and surrounding them. Ash's Pikachu jumped up from its stretcher, letting out an energetic cry before rushing past Meowth and jumping onto Ash's shoulder. Oh, Jessie muttered. This isn't good, James agreed. What's this? Meowth questioned nervously. Well, Ash began, smirking. Let's just say me and the Pikachus here are gonna generate a little excitement for you, Meowth. Ready, Pikachu. Pika. Thundershock. Pikachu leapt forwards, suddenly struck by electricity from the many Pikachu in the room, which was absorbed by the headband it still wore and fed into its own electricity reserves to supercharge the bolt of lightning it sent flying at Team Rocket, shocking the entire villainous group. The pain proved to be too much for James, coughing, which let out a cry as a cloud of gas was expelled from its body, soon igniting from the sparks flying around its body and causing the room to explode violently. Ash turned, grabbing Misty and Joy and pulling them behind the thick glass plating of the backup generator room to hide, with Spearow, the Nidorino, and the many Pikachus quickly joining them. Team Rocket, meanwhile, were sent flying from the force of the blast, rocketing through a hole in the roof of the building and soaring into the distance. Ash coughed, waving the smoke and dust away from his face as the explosion subsided and he emerged from the impromptu shelter, spying Pikachu shaking the dust from its fur at the edge of a large crater. He turned to Joy as she stood, smiling sheepishly. "Sorry about the damage, Nurse Joy," he offered nervously. Joy gave a brief sigh. "Don't worry about it," she said simply. "The Pokémon are safe now and that's all that matters. Now off to bed, all of you. I'll tidy this up, if you're sure," Misty said unsurely, looking around at all the damage before blinking at the Nidorino that sat patiently looking around the room. "Oh, I should return this," she muttered, returning the pink Pokémon to its ball and handing it to Joy. "Thank you," the nurse said with a smile. "And yes, you two should be off on your journeys again in the morning, so you'll need your rest. I'll take care of this." "Okay," Ash murmured. "Well, good night then." Ash and Misty left the room, ing their way to the hostile portion of the center with Pikachu riding on Ash's left shoulder, and Spearow on his right. Pikachu glanced at the new avian addition to the team unsurely, but upon seeing Hero's seeming calmness and acceptance of being captured, soon relaxed. "Say, Ash," Misty said as they approached the sleeping quarters. "What was that back there?" "What do you mean, Misty?" Ash asked curiously, unaware of what the redhead was referring to. "When I was about to throw that Pokeball," she pointed out. "You knew it was empty without looking, and then you knew one with a powerful Pokémon I could use to help us." "How?" Ash stared at her for a moment, perplexed, before simply shrugging. "I don't know," he offered lamely. "I've just always been kinda good at guessing what Pokémon's in a Pokeball, I guess. It's a gift." Misty watched the young man for a minute before reaching into her bag and producing 3 Pokeballs, holding them out. "What Pokémon do I have?" she asked. "Staryu, Starmie, and Goldeen," Ash replied without hesitation. "How?" Misty cried, stashing the balls away once more. "How could you possibly know that?" Ash just shrugged. "I don't know, Misty, but I'm tired. Can you just drop it please?" Misty sighed. "I guess," she relented. "But I swear, I'll figure this out if I have to follow you all over Kanto to do it." "Fine, whatever," Ash muttered, turning and heading into an empty room. "Goodnight, Misty." "Yeah," Misty replied. "Good night, Ash." Eek. Ash spun around in a panic, Spearow's Pokeball already primed in his hand. "What's wrong?" he asked, searching the area for possible dangers. "Get this creepy, hairy, slimy, disgusting thing away from me," Misty cried, scrambling backwards and away from a truly tiny green caterpillar with a 2-pronged red antennae. Ash blinked slowly before sighing. "Seriously?" he asked incredulously. "It's just a caterpie. Grow up, Misty." The redhead glared at Ash before shuddering as the tiny UG Pokémon crawled towards her once again. "Listen, everyone has something they don't like, and I don't like bugs," she yelled. "Now hurry up and get rid of it." Ash sighed again. "Fine," he muttered, making his way over and bending down to pick the caterpie up gently. "Hey there little guy," he said soothingly, putting on a kind smile. "Sorry about my friend. Hey, would you like to come with us?" "Pika Pie," Pikachu chimed in cheerily, giving the insect a wave. Misty blanched at the thought. "You can't be serious," she muttered, watching in no small amount of personal horror as the caterpie too. Okay, little time to chirp happily at the offer, and Ash wasted even less time in pressing a Pokeball to its head, capturing the creature easily. "There," Ash said as he tucked Caterpie's Pokeball away. "I got it away from you." "Happy?" "No," Misty shot back. "Why would you catch that thing?" Ash frowned at her. "First of all," he began, holding a finger up, "it's called a Caterpie. Second, I'm trying to be a Pokemon master. So unfortunately for you, I'm going to need more than just Pikachu and Spearow, and that means there's a big chance I'm going to catch more bug types than this." Misty paled visibly. "You're joking, right?" Ash smirked. "No," he said simply. And third, you decided to start following me around because you think I have some kind of weird power. Now I'm not going to stop you. Honestly, it'll be nice to have a friend along for the trip, but if you're gonna cause a riot over what Pokémon I catch, then we're gonna start having problems. Misty flinched as Ash's voice raised in volume, making it clear how upset he was. She began, ready to bite back before sighing. I guess you're right, she relented. I still don't like bugs, but I guess I can't stop you from training them if you want to. Sorry. Ash started at her for a moment before taking a deep breath. It's fine, he replied. I'm sorry for yelling at you. I'll ask Caterpie to keep its distance from you unless you're okay with it. But it seems to like you. Just please try to be nice. Misty nodded. I'll try, she promised. Thank you. The pair turned to continue their trek through the woods, stopping occasionally to drink from their canteens or so Ash could battle a wild Pokémon. The young man tried to keep his training balanced across his team of 3, though he did give Caterpie slightly more chances to fight than Spearow or Pikachu, as it was fairly new to his active roster. You know, Misty mused as they walked further down the trail, watching Ash's Caterpie as it rested calmly on the boy's shoulder. Pikachu having chosen to run ahead for the time being. That Caterpie is pretty strong, for being so small. Ash smiled proudly. I'd bet it's the strongest Caterpie in Viridian Forest, he bragged. In fact, I'll bet you $10 it evolves before we get to Pewter City. Misty chuckled. I'd like to see that happen, she teased, before sticking her hand out. Alright then, bet. But no more stopping to train. That's cheating. You can only battle Pokémon or trainers that challenge you. Deal. Ash agreed, slapping his hand into Misty's and shaking on their deal. He paused as he looked up at the sky, however, and noted the sun starting to drop below the treeline. Wow, it's getting late. Guess we should set up camp. Here, give me your bag, Misty said as she pulled her hand free, holding it out expectantly. I can set your tent up for you if you go get some firewood. Alright then, Ash agreed and handed his backpack over. Though I only have a sleeping bag, to be honest. No tent. Misty rolled her eyes. Typical boys, she teased, though her smile clearly gave away that she was joking. Lucky I brought a fairly big one, so we can share if the weather turns. Ash blinked owlishly as he felt his face warm. Yeah, lucky, he muttered, before shaking his head and turning into the treeline. I'll go get that firewood now, he blurted out before rushing away. Misty watched him for a moment before shrugging. Boys, she said simply before turning to find a clearing to set up camp. Ash sighed to himself as he wandered through the trees. Why did I run away like that? He asked himself, half-heartedly grabbing twigs and branches that had fallen naturally and tossing away the ones that felt too wet or rotten to burn properly. Now I just look weird. Pika-Pie, Pikachu said from Ash's side, helping, by gathering the smaller twigs his trainer couldn't get to. No, it's not like that, Ash responded without even thinking. She's just offering her tent in case it rains. She's right. After all, I should have gotten one myself. Pikachu. Yeah, I'll probably try and buy one when we get to Pewter. Ash paused, looking around curiously. Say, where did Caterpie go? Misty stood back from her layout of supplies, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow. Alright then, she mused. We've got a sleeping bag each, so the cold shouldn't be an issue. I've got my tent if it rains. And we both have a supply of iodine, so I should be able to fill our water supply too. The redhead nodded surely to herself. Tent first, she decided eventually. If nothing else, we need to keep dry. I can always use the tarp to collect rainwater overnight. With her course of action decided, Misty set to work, gathering up her tent poles and sitting down on a tree stump sheet. Found to start slotting the pieces together. She jumped slightly when something chirped from behind her, turning to find Ash's Caterpie staring up at her inquisitively, though as Ash had promised, little bug seemed to be keeping a distance from her. Oh, she said, giving a shaky smile. Hey there, Caterpie. Didn't want to go with Ash then, huh? Caterpie tilted its head at her before wriggling its way around the stump. Coming to a stop at the pile of parts she was putting together and nudging one of the poles closer to her foot, though it quickly moved back. You want to help me? Misty asked in surprise, and at the excited chirp the creature made in response she gave a smile. Wow, thanks. And I'm sorry. For everything I said before. It wasn't very nice. Caterpie tilted its head again, seeming to regard her with its large, innocent eyes before letting out another happy chirp. It then began looking over the tent pieces, looking back and forth to her and the pile as if asking what was next. Misty giggled. You're pretty enthusiastic, she mused. All right, I'll need that one next please. Misty spent the next few minutes building her tent with her unexpected helper, A.N.D. Soon enough she had erected the smallish shelter beneath the branches of two trees close enough to each other to provide an additional layer of shade in the morning hours. Not bad, she praised, looking down to smile at Caterpie as it sat happily at her ankles. Next is water. Do you know where there's a lake or a stream around here? Caterpie seemed to think for a moment before letting out a chirp, pointing its whole body vaguely towards the east of their camp. Smiling, Misty shouldered her bag, taking a moment to tuck Ashes inside the tent before turning to Caterpie again. Lead the way, she said enthusiastically, before blinking as the little bug started an almost painfully slow crawl. She considered her options for a long time before taking a deep breath to steel herself. Wait, come here, she said, crouching down and offering her arm shakily. Just point the way and I'll do the walking. Caterpie regarded her before nodding, carefully climbing onto the redhead's forearm and settling, pointing with its antennae. Misty stood stock still as this occurred, before noting in surprise that Caterpie's feet were incredibly soft, and a fine layer of fuzz seemed to cover its body. The pair made their way through the trees at a brisk pace, with Misty eventually becoming comfortable enough that she completely forgot about Caterpie being a bug and instead held it gently, hugging the creature to her chest carefully. Caterpie seemed quite content with this situation, slight tilts of its head guiding them to a babbling brook that led into a small pond of crystal clear water. Wow, Misty breathed, looking around at the number of wild Pokémon around the pond, drinking their fill for the night. It's so pretty. Setting Caterpie down, she watched the caterpillar Pokémon move to drink for itself before setting to filling the canteens from the flowing brook, adding a few small drops of iodine for safety. As she stood up, she looked around, noting as the Pokémon turned to leave one by one. Having finished their business, she considered for a moment before shrugging. Hey Caterpie, Misty began, kneeling down next to the bug as she set her bag and the canteens down. Could you keep watch for a bit? I think I'm going to wash off real quick before we head back to camp. Caterpie nodded proudly, turning to scan the tree lines. Misty giggled at its antics before looking around herself, shrugging as she became satisfied nobody was around and turning to the water to bathe. Ash looked around as he sat by the campfire. Where are they? He asked, tossing a roast Ed berry to Pikachu and another to Spearow before poking two more onto his spit. I thought at least Caterpie might be back at camp, but with Misty missing too, should I be worried? He looked to his Pokémon for answers, getting only a shrug from Pikachu in response as Spearow simply ignored his woes in favor of its meal. Ash sighed, focusing on his own dinner instead of worrying. The canteens are gone too, he assured himself. That means Misty went to get water. Maybe Caterpie just followed her. I hope they're okay. The young trainer fell silent, staring at the roasting berries as he slowly turned them over the fire. His mind began wandering to any number of things as the warmth of the fire washed over his face. Eventually, as Ash pulled the berries from the fire and blew on them, a rustling from the treeline grabbed his attention. He looked back, thinking that maybe a wild Pokémon had come to investigate the smells of cooking food, however amateur that cooking may be. What he saw instead sent a warmth through his face that was quite different from that of the fire. Misty stepped out of the trees, Caterpie riding upon her shoulder and chirping happily. Now dressed in a pair of loose shorts and a long t-shirt. The redhead had let her vibrant ginger hair down to dry, now reaching just past her shoulders and framing her face with curtains of fiery orange. Her calm smile and occasional laughter as Caterpie's fuzz tickled her cheek made Ash smile slightly before he frowned again. Ash stood, approaching the two. There you are, he cried. Do you know how worried we were when you weren't at camp? Misty blinked owlishly at him for a moment before looking past Ash's shoulder to Pikachu and Spearow, both eating their meals happily by the campfire. Worried, huh? She asked knowingly, smirking. Is that why you started dinner without us then? Ash glared at her angrily, but the creeping blush rising up his neck gave away his embarrassment. Well, I had to feed Pikachu and Spearow. He shit back defensively. They've worked really hard today and they don't deserve to go hungry because you went wandering off. Misty shook her head and moved past Ash calmly. Relax, she said. I went to refill our water. And decided to take a quick bath while I was at the lake. No big deal, right Caterpie? Caterpie gave out a series of chirps that sounded almost like laughter. Even as Ash stomped back to his seat and sat down in a huff. See if I cook you two anything then, he muttered, but soon relented as Caterpie started at him. Fine. Come here, then, Caterpie. The worm-like Pokémon crawled its way over to Ash as Misty sat down across from him, spearing and roasting her own berries on the spit. They sat in silence for a while, Ash casually pulling a magazine from his backpack to thumb through as they ate. What's that? Misty asked curiously, taking a bite of her meal. Ash glanced up at her, swallowing his own mouthful before answering. Kanto Digest, he answered. It's mostly garbage, I admit. But there's some useful information in there. Like what? Ash folded the magazine over itself backwards before holding it up to show Misty the page he was reading. They do interviews with popular trainers sometimes. Last week was a cover on Pewter City Gym and their leader, Brock. As he spoke, he placed the magazine back on his knee. Says here he specializes in rock types. That means I'm gonna struggle when I get there. Misty raised her brow curiously. Why? She asked curiously. Ash looked at her critically. Because of all my Pokémon, only Pikachu isn't weak to rock-type attacks. He explained. And even then, a lot of rock types are also ground-type, meaning electric attacks won't work unless we get them wet first. And I doubt setting off the sprinklers is a legal move, he joked. Misty shrugged. You'd be surprised what's legal in gym matches, she mused. But hey, doesn't Butterfree learn some powerful moves when it evolves? Maybe you could spend some time in the forest training first. Ash nodded absently as he considered Misty's words. That's true, he mused. I think there's a few other Pokémon around here that could help too. No. Sure if I'd be able to find them though. Like what? Ash pulled his Pokédex from his backpack, where he'd stored it for the night. Well, he began. According to DexNav, you can find a lot of bug and grass types in this area. Like Oddish and Bellsprout, and if you're lucky, even things like Scyther or Pinsir. Any of them would make Pewter Gym much easier. Misty nodded along, swallowing her test mouthful of food before talking again. But wouldn't it feel kind of cheap to just go out and catch Pokémon for a type advantage? She reasoned. I understand your reasoning, but surely training what you already have to overcome their weaknesses would show better skill as a trainer. Maybe, Ash allowed, thinking heavily. Maybe. Misty regarded Ash for a moment before sighing, standing and stretching with a yawn. Well, why don't you sleep on it? She offered. You can't exactly do much right now anyway. Ash nodded, looking once more over the page he was reading before tucking the magazine away in his backpack. All right everyone, he called, gaining his Pokémon's attention. Lights out. Everyone get some rest. Ash stepped behind a tree to change, coming back to camp to find Spearow perched in a branch above the tent. Head dipped in sleep. Caterpie had curled up on the tree stump in the center of their camp with a leaf drawn over it, and Pikachu was lying next to it. Ash smiled, and pulled his sleeping bag from where Misty had left it for him, taking a glance at the sky before shrugging and laying back against the stump with his legs tucked into the bag. Good night everyone, Ash muttered as he closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep. Ash awoke the next day to the morning sun shining across his eyes. In a daze, he blinked his eyes open before smiling and letting out a yawn as he stretched. Well, he said to himself as he stood up. Time to get the day started. Fishing around in his backpack, Ash pulled out a fairly large, black vinyl bag filled with water and a short hose ending in a shower head. Making his way into the trees, he found a secluded spot before setting up his camping shower and bathing. As he returned to camp, freshly washed and dressed, he noticed Misty still asleep in her tent. Protected from the early sun as she was under the cover of the trees, Ash decided to leave her be and instead wake his team up for some early training. Pikachu, Caterpie, he whispered, gently shaking the two Pokémon that had fallen asleep atop the tree stump. Come on, time to wake up now. As expected, Pikachu rolled over and blinked at the sky in a sleep-addled daze much as Ash had. Caterpie woke with a stretch and a chirp of greeting before crawling up Ash's outstretched arm to his shoulder. "Good morning to you too." Ash chuckled as the caterpillar Pokémon nuzzled his cheek. He then turned to the trees where Spearow had roosted, finding the avian had moved. Ash mused, briefly checking his Pokédex. "Ah, must have gone hunting for some breakfast. Well, Spearow knows how to find camp. It'll be safe." With that decided, Ash once again made his way into the tree line, being careful not to stray too far from camp as he searched the foliage for any potential Pokémon. A shrill squawk and the sounds of battle above him soon caught his attention, however, and Ash looked up only to cry out in panic and duck down as Spearow dove past his head, close. Leaf followed by a rather large-looking bird with a shock of pink-red plumage atop its rounded head. "A Pidgeotto!" Ash cried, climbing back to his feet as Spearow attempted to shake its assailant by weaving through the trees. Ash quickly grabbed his Pokédex and held it out, scanning the Pidgeotto as it darted past him again. An evolved form of Pidgey, but not quite as docile. Pidgeotto is armed with sharp claws and dives from the sky to capture its prey. Pidgeotto can be territorial when it comes to its hunting grounds, and do not appreciate other bird Pokémon entering without permission. "Oh," Ash muttered. Spearow must have been hunting in Pidgeotto's territory without realizing. "Quick, Spearow, return." As he spoke, Ash pulled out Spearow's Pokeball and held it out, recalling his own bird as a beam of red light shot out and absorbed it. The Pidgeotto pulled up just short of the tree it was about to impact and looked about, eventually setting its sights on Ash, Pikachu, and Caterpie. Ash glared defiantly at the bird. "I don't like it when somebody bullies my Pokémon," he said in warning. The Pidgeotto seemed to regard him for a moment before a powerful flap of its wings sent it shooting upwards and out of sight. Ash breathed a sigh of relief, smiling to himself as he tucked Spearow's ball away on his belt to give the bird a rest, only to cry out as something shot out of the canopy above him and sent him tumbling along the ground, with Caterpie flying from his shoulder with a cry of panic. The Pidgeotto circled around again, zeroing in on Caterpie's flailing form and diving as the caterpillar hit the ground. "Caterpie!" Ash yelled, rolling to a stop on his knees and thinking fast. "Quick, string shot!" Caterpie reared up as the Pidgeotto approached, spraying a line of sticky off-white thread out of its mouth and entangling the oncoming predator's wings with every flap. As the Pidgeotto began careening towards the ground, Caterpie rolled away, leaving the bird to crash into the dirt and struggle in its sticky confines. "Good job, Caterpie," Ash praised, recalling the bug Pokémon to its Pokeball for safety. Many birds ate bugs like Caterpie, after all. "All right, Pikachu, your turn." Thundershock. Pikachu launched into action readily, leaping into the air with a cry of effort and letting loose with a jolt of electricity that arced into Pidgeotto's body, causing it to cry out before laying prone in defeat. Ash grinned as Pikachu returned to his side, grabbing an empty Pokeball from his belt and tossing it at the defeated Pokémon. 3 shakes of the device and a victorious chime later, Ash rushed forward to collect his newest partner. "Wait till Misty sees this," he cried, raising the Pokeball in triumph before quickly tucking it away on his belt once more. "That makes 4, the young trainer mused, letting Pikachu climb onto his shoulder before turning back to camp. "Let's go see if Misty's up yet and maybe give Pidgeotto a chance to heal up a bit. I'm sure we've still got some Waron or Sherry berries left." Misty woke with a yawn, stretching her arms as she slid out of her sleeping bag. Sleepily she peeked out of the tent, seeing the amp empty but for Ash's sleeping bag rolled up next to his backpack. "Must have gone for a walk," Misty mumbled, ducking back into her tent and zipping the door closed to get dressed. When she next emerged, it was in her traveling clothes and with a smile, rolling her miniaturized Pokeballs around in her hand. "I guess I should let you guys get some exercise," she mused, tucking the balls into the special pocket in her bag and scribbling a note for Ash before setting off into the woods herself, making her way to the pristine pond based on memory alone. As she approached the embankment of the pond hidden by the tree line, she slowed down, looking around first before making her way slowly into the clearing. She didn't want to scare the Pokémon away or come across as a threat, after all. When it Seemed the few Pokémon were aware and comfortable enough with her presence, she slowly pulled her Pokeballs out and sat down, setting them in a line in front of her. "Okay guys," she said out loud, focusing on her team within their capsules. "We're not battling here, just giving you a chance to stretch and have some fun before we move on." With that said, Misty picked up the first of her Pokeballs and pointed it at the pond. "Goldeen!" she cried, and the Pokémon was released with a flash of light, allowing the white and orange koi-like fish Pokémon to splash into the water calmly where it began swimming carefree. Misty smiled to herself before repeating the motion with her other Pokeballs. "Staryu, Starmie." Two starfish-like Pokémon appeared at her call, one brown with 5 limbs, the other a lavender color with 10. And both sporting a large red gem in the center of their bodies acting as an eye of sorts. The 3 Pokémon splashed about in the water, playing happily together as they did and actively including any wild Pokémon that decided to join in. Misty smiled as she watched, sitting back and relaxing for a bit as her mind wandered. "I wonder where Ash went off to," she mused, blinking as she spotted what looked like a Pidgeotto chasing a Spearow in the sky above. Weird. After a while of relaxing, Misty eventually sat up again, calling her Pokémon back to the shore for a snack. As they ate, however, a rustling in the trees behind her caught her attention, and she spun around to see what it was. She soon relaxed as Ash emerged, letting out a laugh as he seemed to trip on a root before catching himself. A few of the wild Pokémon nearest to them moved away, but soon regrouped a little further along the bank. "Wow," Ash breathed as he looked around the clearing with a smile. "It's really pretty here." Quote, "I know right," Misty responded with a smile. "Caterpie showed me this place last night. It's where I got our water from. It seems like a peace zone for everyone to get a drink." Ash nodded, looking around at the many Pokémon casually going about their business, even those that were predators to others paying no mind as they drank their fill. "Amazing," he whispered, before noting Misty's Pokémon in the water nearest them. "Oh hey, good idea. Everyone could use some time to play before we move on." Misty nodded as Ash pulled out his Pokeballs, releasing his 3 other Pokémon besides Pikachu. She then blinked in surprise. "Hey, when did you catch a Pidgeotto?" she asked in shock. Ash beamed proudly. "This morning," he answered. "It was chasing Spearow because of hunting territories. We managed to defeat it and I caught it afterwards." Misty started at Ash in awe before turning to watch his Pokémon. Pikachu was already running along the pond's edge. And Caterpie was once again drinking from the water. Pidgeotto and Spearow seemed to be regarding each other carefully, however, and kept a wide berth. "You might have some trouble there," Misty said, nodding at the 2 birds. "Spearow and Pidgeylines are rivals in the wild, so they may not get along." Ash looked between the birds in thought before nodding. "No worries," he said confidently, sitting with his arms outstretched. "Spearow, Pidgeotto, come here please." Misty watched in confusion as the bird Pokémon turned to Ash and took wing, each one perching on one of his outstretched arms. She winced slightly as she thought of their talons digging into Ash's skin, glad she didn't have anything dangerous like that in her team. Now, Ash spoke, seemingly oblivious to the sharp talons gripping his skin. "I want you two to get along while we're together, okay? We're a team, and that means we stick together, no matter what." The birds seemed to regard Ash for a moment before looking to one another. And once again a tension seemed to form between them. Ash sighed. "And if anyone causes trouble on my team, they get put into timeout," he continued. "Which means no playtime, no special snacks. And you miss your turn in the battle rotation." Spearow and Pidgeotto's attention snapped back to Ash instantly. Once again they seemed to regard him, and Misty blinked as he stared eyed back at them both with an intense gaze. With another glance to one another the birds relented, bowing their heads to their trainer. Ash smiled. "Good," he praised. "Now go on and play." As the 2 avians took wing once more, separating to play but avoiding any trouble with the other, Misty once again regarded Ash carefully. There was something strange about how he could command his Pokémon. While some trainers could command respect or fear from their Pokémon teams, that was often through shows of force. And Ash didn't seem the type to use such things. He seemed instead to connect with them, somehow. Showing nothing but kindness to them and, as she'd just seen, providing stern but fair punishments should they step out of line. It wasn't unlike a parent talking to their child, she realized. But the level of understanding that Ash seemed to have with his Pokémon was more than she'd ever experienced. She blinked as she realized she had been staring, turning back to watch the pond as Ash sat down to relax himself. Soon stretching out on his back. "It really is nice out here, huh?" he asked aloud, and Misty hummed in response. "Must be a pretty nice spot for a home," he continued. "Maybe a log cabin. Let the Pokémon run free in the woods, maybe give them a shelter to sleep in if they want it. Just yourself and nature. Sounds lonely," Misty mused. "I mean sure, it's nice. But do get lonely without someone to share it with." Ash hummed to himself. "I guess," he agreed. "But if I ever settle down, I'm definitely building a house myself." They fell into comfortable silence for a time, simply laying and relaxing by the pond as their Pokémon ran around and played, some coming to rest at their side before joining in once again. Wild Pokémon came and went, often freezing in place at the sight of the two trainers before cautiously making their way into the clearing as no danger was sighted. It wasn't until around midday that the two trainers stirred from their relaxation, disturbed by the sounds of panic and crashing in the trees across the pond. "I can't believe how many Pokémon are around here." A familiar, feminine voice laughed cruelly, and Ash watched as Team Rocket came bounding from the treeline, chasing after a Pidgey that tried to fly into the air, only to be caught in a net. "Ripe for the taking, right Jess?" the blue-haired man named James said, pulling the net he had fired from his shoulder-mounted launcher back by the long rope it was attached to. Ash and Misty leapt to their feet, glaring angrily at the pair as they began to hurry around the pond's edge. "Hey!" Ash cried out. "Leave those Pokémon alone. Nyarth, it's dat twerp from Viridian City." Their Meowth cried out as it dropped from a tree above, blocking their path. "I forgot to thank ya for that shock you gave me." Jessie folded her arms across her chest as she glared at the two younger trainers. "And what exactly are you two doing here?" she asked. "Pretty far off the path. Hoping to snipe some rare Pokémon. Were you? Well, too bad." James chimed in, laughing haughtily. "Because all the Pokémon in this forest belong to Team Rocket now, including yours." As he spoke, the blue-haired villain turned his launcher on Ash and Misty's Pokémon that were quickly approaching their trainers, managing with a single shot to ensnare most of Ash's Pokémon in a large net. A second shish. OT soon netted Misty's team much the same. "No!" Misty cried, turning to dive into the pond before Ash grabbed her arm. She spun around, eyes wide, before blinking as she saw Ash's stern, serious face and Caterpie on his shoulder. Unsure which to focus on more. "I got this," he said quietly, letting her arm go as he began stalking towards Team Rocket. "Hey, stay back, ya hear?" Meowth cried out, brandishing its claws in threat. "I won't hold back, Nyarth." Coughing, James called out, summoning his Pokémon to come crashing through the trees. "Use your sludge attack, Ekans," Jessie cried at almost the same time, her own Pokémon answering the call as it reared from the cover of the grass. "Poison Sting." Ash moved slowly and calmly, shifting to the side to allow the sludge attack to pass him by harmlessly before ducking under the flying barbs of Poison Sting. "Caterpie," he commanded quietly, raising his arm as Caterpie crawled along to his wrist. String Shot. As the silk threads shot out of Caterpie's mouth, Meowth began laughing. "What can one little bug do against us, Nyarth?" he taunted, moving to leap into action and attack, only to blink in confusion as his legs failed to move and he instead fell flat on his face. "Nyarth, what's going on?" Jessie facepalmed with a sigh. "Embarrassing," she muttered. "Disgraceful," James agreed. Coughing, tackle attack. Ash flicked his arm up, allowing Caterpie to leap much higher into the air than normal and avoid the attack easily. Corkscrew tackle. Ash commanded, and in response Caterpie began to spin its body in the air, gaining speed as it dove from the air before colliding with Jessie's Ekans. "You little brat," Jessie growled out. "Ekans, use your wrap and stop that insect from moving." "String Shot," Ash said in response. And as Ekans attempted to wrap its body around Caterpie, it instead found itself sticking to its own skin as Caterpie wriggled out of its grip. "You're starting to get on my nerves, twerp," James warned. Coughing, sludge. As the floating Pokémon filled its mouth with the sludge attack, ready to spit it at Caterpie, the worm Pokémon reared up and spit its string shot at Coughing, sealing its mouth instead. Coughing blinked at the obstruction, beginning to panic as the sludge began to build up in its mouth, mixing with the volatile gases within its body. At the sight of the floating ball of volatile gases beginning to swell up, Ash took a step back. "Uh-oh," he muttered, glancing from the waiting explosion to the nets containing the many Pokémon nervously. Stealing his nerves, Ash charged forwards. "Caterpie, tackle!" he cried, barreling past the battle and snatching the nets from Team Rocket's grasp as Caterpie tackled Coughing into James, causing the blue-haired villain to cug and drop his launcher as the impact winded him. Ash kept running, dragging the nets behind him even as he attempted to loosen the bindings. "Caterpie, get back!" he cried as Coughing kept swelling. With a chirping battle cry, Caterpie quickly fired off one last string shot, snaring Ekans' tail as it attempted to dive into the ground and swinging the snake Pokémon around to its trainer. Jessie cried out in shock at the impact, falling in a heap on top of James and Coughing just as the inevitable occurred and Coughing exploded, sending Team Rocket soaring into the air. "Looks like Team Rocket's blasting off again," the trio cried as they disappeared into the distance. Ash covered his head, diving to the ground as the explosion rang out. He looked up in horror, searching the area for his Caterpie, and hoping it managed to get away in time. As the many captured Pokémon managed to wriggle free of their bindings, the wild Pokémon quickly escaping the clearing and heading for their homes, Ash rushed into the blast zone. Searching frantically for his Pokémon. "Caterpie!" he cried out in a panic. "Caterpie, where are you?" "Ash!" Misty called out from the other side of the blast zone. "Come quick!" Ash rushed over, quickly joined by Pikachu, Pidgeotto, and Spearow. "Did you find Caterpie?" he asked frantically, gasping for air. "Well," Misty muttered, hunching down with her back to Ash. When she stood up, she turned around holding a large, emerald-green cocoon-like creature. "Yes and no." Ash blinked in confusion for a moment, before a beaming smile crossed his face. "All right," he cried out, grabbing the cocoon from Misty's arms and dancing around happily with it. "Caterpie, congratulations, you evolved." Misty watched the two dancing around happily for a moment, a smile on her face, before she suddenly scowled. "Darn it." Ash blinked, looking to Misty curiously. "What's wrong, Misty? Now I owe you $10. Ash stared at her for a moment, before bursting out laughing. Ash awoke the next morning with a yawn, a stretch, and a smile. After the stresses of the previous day, he and Misty had decided to camp one more night in the same clearing before moving on, and with his Caterpie now a Metapod, the young trainer felt ready for anything. After a quick shower and a moment to get dressed, Ash set about packing his half of the camp up, and not long after finishing offered to pack Misty's half too as she got ready for the day. It was only fair since she had set the camp up originally. With that done and breakfast quickly eaten, Ash and Misty set about another day of hiking through the woods. As took point, humming happily to himself without a Cree in the world. Misty's frightened screaming cut into his carefree humming suddenly, causing Ash to flinch before turning to see the redhead hanging from a tree branch, trembling in fear. "What's wrong?" Ash asked, approaching her carefully. "Did you see another bug?" "Yes," Misty cried, still trembling as she clenched her eyes tight shut. "Get rid of it, please." Ash looked up at the girl before smirking slightly. "I thought that might be what was bugging you, Tilda," he teased, chuckling to himself. At Misty's glare, however, he flinched. Sorry. Just trying to distract you. I'll get rid of it." As he turned around, Ash scanned the area, looking for what might have spooked Misty until his eyes landed on a small, pale yellow worm with a large pink nose and a large spike on its head. "Oh hey, a Weedle," he said happily, pulling his Pokédex out. Weedle, the hairy bug Pokémon. The sharp stinger on its head guarantees that any attacker will get the point, right where it hurts. "A stinger, huh?" Ash mused, rubbing his chin in thought. "Can't just grab it then, it might sting me. Probably shouldn't try to battle it either. Whatever you do, just hurry up," Misty cried. "I'm working on it." Ash shot back before squatting down in front of the approaching worm. "Hey little guy, are you lost? Need some help getting home?" The Weedle paused, regarding him quietly for a moment before sitting back. Ash smiled, holding his arm out calmly, and the Weedle crawled up to his forearm before stopping and looking around as Ash stood. "That's it," Ash said soothingly, walking slowly towards the tree line. "Let's just keep nice and calm, and we'll have you home in a jiffy. Don't want your parents worried about you, do we?" The Weedle seemed to keep looking back at Ash as he walked, each time calming down from visible agitation at being moved before looking around and becoming agitated again. Each time it did this, Ash slowed his pace, gently calling its attention to him before continuing again. Eventually, he managed to reach a tall tree at the edge of the path, holding his arm up to one of the many branches and allowing the Weedle to crawl away. The young trainer let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, taking his arm back and gently shaking it out before returning to Misty. "Okay, all gone," he said simply, helping the girl down from her hiding place. Misty breathed a sigh of relief. "Thanks, Ash," she muttered, blinking as the sound of rushing wind met her ears only to cry out in shock as the edge of a blade appeared mere inches from her nose. "Gah! Silence, wench," a raspy voice commanded. Following the blade down to its hilt with their eyes, Ash and Misty came across a young-looking man in shorts and a tank top, over which he wore a set of what looked like samurai armor, complete with a kabuto helmet which cast a shadow over his eyes. A butterfly net was strapped to his back. "Do I address the Pokémon trainer hailing from the town of Pallet?" Ash blinked in confusion before frowning. "That would be me," he bit out, catching the young man's attention. "And I'd sue. Gee, just getting that sword out of my friend's face, before I get upset with you." The samurai-garbed trainer regarded him for a moment before stepping back, sheathing the blade with a flourish. "Alas, my apologies," he offered, bowing respectfully. "I was informed that another trainer from Pallet would be passing through these woods, who would be, I quote, a shrieking, sniveling, pathetic excuse for a trainer. It seems I was mistaken." Ash's frown deepened at the description of him, more so that this person had instead applied it to Misty. "My friend has a fear of bugs," he bit out, grinding his teeth. "That doesn't make her pathetic. Though. Who even told you that?" "Ah, 'twas a marvelously skilled trainer from Pallet," the samurai declared, smiling to himself. "He called himself Gary Oak, I believe." Ash sighed. "Of course it was him," he muttered before looking to the trainer again. "All right, you found me. What did you want with me?" The samurai trainer blinked, before standing to attention once more. "Ah yes, a pertinent question. I have taken it upon myself to test each Pallet trainer to pass through these woods, to see if they are worthy to be called trainers. I am glad to say, the previous 3 trainers were excellent in their own rights." Ash nodded to himself sagely. "So the others have already passed through here, huh?" he asked. "All right, I'll bite. What kinda test?" The trainer grinned, tilting his head down so his eyes were once more cast in the shadows of his helmet. "I am called Samurai," he began dramatically, and Ash couldn't help but roll his eyes. "And this is my challenge. Defeat me in Pokémon battle, and I will let you pass. Lose, however, and your passage will be denied." Misty frowned. "And what authority do you have to stop people coming through?" In a flash of movement, Samurai had once again drawn his blade and pointed it at Misty. Ash, however, stepped in front of the blade, the brim of his cap covering his eyes as he brought his hands up to clap around the blade, stopping it in its path. "That's quite enough," Ash started calmly, releasing the blade for Samurai to sheath once more. "You want a battle? That's fine. But stop pointing that thing at my friend. The challenge has been accepted." Samurai cried dramatically, leaping back from Ash to give them a battlefield and completely ignoring his words otherwise. "We will battle in a 2 versus 2 match. You may substitute your Pokémon, but if you do, it is considered a forfeit on that Pokémon's behalf." Ash stared at Samurai for a moment before nodding. "Deal," he said simply, moving to his own position as Misty hurried out of the way, standing beneath a tree. "Shall we release our Pokémon at the same time, to make it fair?" "A splendid idea, novice trainer from Pallet." "My name is Ash," Ash corrected. "Nevertheless," Samurai cried. "The wench." "Misty," Ash interrupted. "Her name is Misty." "The wench," Samurai continued, ignoring him, and Ash's jaw set as he grinded his teeth in frustration. "Shall count from 3. We shall each release on go." Ash nodded. "All right then," he said, glancing at Misty. "When you're ready." Misty looked between the two, from Samurai. dignified arrogance to Ash's quiet fury, and nodded. On go, she stated, getting 2 nods in return. 3, 2, 1, go. In tandem, Ash and Samurai threw their Pokeballs into their impromptu arena, each releasing their Pokémon at the same time. Ash's Spearow took to the air immediately, swooping in loops as it got itself pumped for the battle. From Samurai's side came a large, upright, brown, shelled beetle Pokémon with powerful-looking steel-gray pincers atop its head. Its stout legs each ended in 3 toes, and its thin arms ended in 3 clawed hands. A Pinsir, Ash mused. Impressive. Those are pretty rare. Only the most disciplined. Samurai boasted. Let us begin. Pinsir, advance. Ash waited for the Pinsir to start charging forward before nodding. Spearow, use Leer. As the Pinsir charged forwards, Spearow dove towards it, glaring directly into its eyes and causing the beetle Pokémon to flinch for a moment, creating an opening. Now Spearow, dive and use your Fury attack. As commanded, Spearow used the opening to dive through Pinsir's horns, landing on its back and latching on with its claws to begin pecking furiously at the beetle. Pinsir began flailing in pain, trying in vain to shake Spearow off before eventually leaping backwards, slamming its back against the ground. Spearow squawked, managing to flap away just before it was squashed. A good strategy, Samurai praised. But not good enough. Pinsir, leap and use Vice Grip. Pinsir nodded as it got back to its feet, waiting for Spearow to pass overhead before leaping with surprising leg power and clamping its horns around Spearow, pinning down its wings as it began crushing the poor bird. Spearow, peck. Ash cried. Not so fast. Samurai cut in. Pinsir, seismic toss. As per their trainer's commands. Spearow began to once again peck at the back of Pinsir's head, only to cry out in shock as it was thrown violently towards the ground, impacting the dirt hard. Pinsir came back down to earth soon after, landing on its stout feet and standing over Spearow, who pushed itself back to its own feet defiantly. That's it, Spearow. Ash cheered. Get back in the air and use Fury attack one more time. Spearow spread its wings, the sudden motion causing Pinsir to flinch back and allowing Spearow to take to the air. The small bird Pokémon circled around, staying in Pinsir's blind spot before diving in and once more delivering a series of furious pecks and scratches to Pinsir's back, relentlessly pressing its attack until Pinsir stumbled and fell face down, defeated. Yes, Ash hissed, pumping his fist as Spearow returned to him, resting on his arm and panting for breath. Impressive, Samurai praised, recalling his Pinsir and producing a second Pokeball. But do not count your victory yet. Go, Metapod. In a burst of light, Samurai released a Metapod onto the field, the cocoon Pokémon standing on its end as the sun beat down. Ash regarded the Pokémon warily. You don't seem the type to send a defenseless Pokémon to fight, he mused as Spearow took to the battlefield once more. What gives? Do not underestimate my Metapod. Samurai shot back. Commence battle, and you shall see how well it fares. Ash shrugged. All right then, he muttered before snapping back into action. Spearow, use Peck. As Spearow circled around to dive at the motionless Metapod, Samurai smirked. Amateur, he shouted suddenly, whipping his hand out. Metapod, string shot. As Spearow approached, Samurai's Metapod suddenly leapt towards it, spitting strands of sticky silk that wrapped and tangled around Spearow's body, causing the bird to crash into the earth below and skid to a stop, defeated. Ash blinked in shock. Wow, he muttered, pulling out Spearow's Pokeball and recalling his Pokémon before switching for another. Guess I know not to underestimate your Metapod. Now go, Metapod. With a flash, Ash's own Metapod appeared on the field, staring down its mirror image opponent determinedly. Oh no, Misty sighed, sitting down on one of the raised roots of the tree she was standing under. Better get comfy, I guess, we're gonna be here a while. Metapod, tackle. Ash cried out, shockin'. Misty as his Metapod shot out a string of silk, latching onto a rock behind its opponent before reeling itself in at high speed to deliver a full-bodied tackle, sending both Chrysalis Pokémon tumbling through the dirt. Impressive, Samurai cried out. But my Metapod shall not be defeated so easily. Metapod, use Harden. The two Metapod rolled back onto their standing point, facing each off. Once more as Samurai's Metapod gained something of a glossy sheen to its shell. Ash blinked. Oh, K. He asked quietly, before throwing his arm out. Metapod. Grab his Metapod with string shot and throw it. Ash's Metapod once more spat out a line of silk, ensnaring its opponent and swinging it through the air, releasing Samurai's Metapod mid-swing and letting it flip through the air to crash into a tree at the edge of the clearing, tumbling to the ground soon after. You are very skilled, novice. Samurai praised. But not skilled enough. Now, I shall. Pausing suddenly, Samurai frowned and looked into the distance behind Ash. This battle must end, he muttered quietly, his voice shaking slightly. Misty frowned slightly. Well, that hardly seems fair, she said, crossing her arms. It looks like you're only calling it off because you're losing. Samurai didn't respond, instead pulling his Pokeball out and recalling his own Metapod. Just as she was about to berate him further, missed. Why blinked as she saw Ash had frozen in place, his eyes wide. Ash, she asked quietly, concern leaking into her voice as she approached him. She jumped as Ash snapped his gaze to her suddenly. Samurai's right, he whispered. Whipping around suddenly as a cacophonous buzzing filled the air. Misty blanched as a swarm of dark shapes seemed to rise above the treeline. Is that, she muttered, trembling. Samurai nodded numbly as the swarm seemed to approach them. Beedrill swarm. Ash shouted as the closest of the large, insectoid Pokémon dove at them. Misty cried out in fear as she dove out of the way. Run! The three trainers turned tail and ran, Ash quickly ducking down to scoop his Metapod into his arms. As they ran, panicked shouting drew Ash's attention to another trio just behind a thin treeline. Jesse and James ran practically alongside them, yelling in fear and still gripping the shredded remains of what Ash could only assume was an ill-suited guard against the Beedrill's powerful toxic stingers. Meowth ran ahead of them both, stumbling through the taller grass and knotted roots on his hind legs. In his distracted bewilderment at Team Rocket's presence, Ash failed to notice the low-hanging branches that Samurai and Misty had ducked under, resulting in a mouthful of leaves that left him spluttering. His foot then caught on something he couldn't see, sending him crashing down and leaving Metapod to roll away from his arms. The sound of buzzing filled his ears. Metapod, harden! Ash cried out in desperation, just catching sight of his Pokémon's carapace taking on a cry. Stalling sheen before the swarm was upon them, a number of them breaking off to dive down at Ash. He braced himself, curling into a ball and shielding his face as the buzzing drew nearer and nearer, before fading away. Cautiously, Ash allowed himself to look up, spotting the Beedrill flying off into the distance once more, with Metapod clutched in the grip of one of their drones. Ash grit his teeth and slammed his fist into the ground, pushing back to his feet. His first thought was to go after them, to rescue his Metapod, but going alone would be stupid. I need help, he muttered to himself, watching in pain as the swarm once more disappeared over the treeline before turning and heading after Misty and Samurai. Misty paced back and forth in the safety of Samurai's cabin, fretting nervously. Where is he? She asked for what felt like the 100th time, biting her nails. Samurai sat towards the back of the cabin, kneeling on a tatami mat with his sword and a caretaking kit set out before him. As with the previous questions, Samurai elected to ignore Misty, simply going about his task of sword maintenance as he coated the blade of his katana in a layer of oil. Tuup is probably Weedle food by now, Meowth snarked. Misty whipped around in anger, glaring at the talking Pokémon. They had begged to be let into the cabin when they saw Misty and Samurai taking shelter, having rashed out of the trees not long after the two. They now saw bundled in one of Samurai's larger bug nets, with the threat of the younger trainer's blade not spoken but implicit as it had not been sheathed since they took refuge. I would not upset the lady, Samurai cautioned without looking up from his task. A woman can be very dangerous when worried for her partner. Very true, James buttered under his breath, flinching as both Jesse and Misty turned to glare at him. Misty took a breath. Ash isn't my partner, Samurai, she said more calmly, returning to watching out of the darkened window. He's my friend, but that doesn't mean I can't be worried. Forgive me, Samurai responded. From how Ash leapt to your defense before, I had assumed as such. Yeah, well, you know what they I about people who assume, Misty muttered, staring out of the window before gasping. There he is. Rushing to the door, Misty ripped it open, blinking in surprise and stepping aside as Ash stormed inside and slammed the door shut again. Ash, you three. Ash cried, marching across the small, one-room shack towards Team Rocket. He paused in front of them, reaching down and grabbing Jessie and James by their collars and dragging them within inches of his face. "What did you do? Let go of me," James whined, struggling within the net that bound him and Jessie together. "You're creasing my uniform. You'd better back off now, twerp," Jessie growled. "If you know what's good for you." Ash raised a brow in question. "You're tied up, and I'm sure you've seen the special tool my new friend over there has ready if you try anything." Samurai glanced up, casually sliding his blade back into its sheath. Jessie glared defiantly. "I'm not scared of his little toothpick." "I kind of am," James whimpered. "I'm surrounded by morons," Meowth sighed. With a swipe of his claws, Meowth cut the net from himself and stood up, casually strolling out of his confines and leaving Jessie and James behind. "Hey, just quit yappin', Nyarth," Meowth snapped, sighing. "Sit down, Tuup, I'll fill yours in." Ash watched Meowth quietly, dropping Jessie and James unceremoniously before making his way over to sit down. Misty soon joined him, and Meowth crossed his arms as he seemed to gather his thoughts. "So, the feline Pokémon began, pacing. We was mindin' our own business, you see." "Doubt it," Ash muttered with a roll of his eyes. He then yelped, leaning back as a flash of claws swiped across where his face had been mere moments before. "Don't interrupt me," Meowth hissed. Ash blanched and nodded, sitting forward again as Meowth began speaking once more. "Okay. Now, as I was sayin', we was mindin' our own business on a mission from da boss. You got me so far." Misty blinked, leaning closer in interest. "Your boss?" she asked curiously. "Don't worry bout him none, ya hear? Anyway, we was tryin' to find what's called a Princess Weedle. That'd be da kid of da Queen Beedrill, from da hive in da woods. Dat's when dat big lug ova deer woke up all da drones. Ya followin' me?" Ash and Misty glanced at each other before looking back to Meowth. "So, you were sent to kidnap the Queen Beedrill's child?" Ash asked. "Wouldn't that make her really mad?" "Yeah," Jessie called from the corner. "Well, the plan was to get away and let you twerps deal with her. But this buffoon woke her up." "Hey," James cried in protest. "It's not my fault you pushed me. What did you expect?" As the two began bickering between themselves, Ash sighed and looked back to Meowth. "So," he asked expectantly, "where's the Weedle?" "Dat's da thing, Nyarth," Meowth replied. "It wasn't deer, but da Beedrill, dey tink we took her, so dey chased us at back." Ash nodded and sat back, rubbing his chin in thought. "That may be why they took Metapod," he mused. "I read somewhere that Beedrill are attracted by brighter colors, so maybe one of the drones got confused when it saw Metapod's shell." Misty nodded along before blinking. "Wait," she said. "What do you mean they took Metapod?" Ash shrugged. "Exactly what I said," he explained. "I tripped over a root, and one of them took Metapod when he rolled away from me." Misty's brow twitched in irritation. "How can you be so calm about that?" she demanded, leaping to her feet. "Your Pokémon is in danger." "No, it's not," Samurai cut in as Ash rose to his feet himself, stopping Ash's retort before he could start. "Beedrill are carnivorous creatures, but rarely will they attack a Butterfree's brood in fear of retaliation. More likely, what Ash suggested is correct, they believed Metapod to be their princess evolved. Likely Metapod is simply being guarded in the hive's royal nursery until it evolves into their new queen." Misty Street. Ared at the stoic Samurai in shock as Ash thought. "And when he doesn't?" Ash asked. Samurai shrugged. "Likely they will frenzy and kill it," he said in a matter-of-fact tone. "Beedrill do not take kindly to intruders. Even one they themselves bring into the hive. They will likely swarm and kill your Butterfree as a preemptive strike before it can attack them." Ash sighed and sat back down, nodding. "So waiting isn't an option," he mused. "I'll have to go in there and get him back. Tonight." Misty blinked. "Why tonight?" she questioned, confused and curious. Ash didn't answer for a moment, drew his fingers on the table as he thought. "Beedrill are mostly diurnal," he explained eventually. "Meaning they operate in the day. So when the sun goes down, the hive sleeps." Samurai nodded. "You know much," he praised. "But you say, mostly, they are diurnal. Why is that?" Ash nodded to himself. "Because," he replied, "the Beedrill hive has a night guard. So while the hive is less active in the night, it's not inactive. I'll have to be careful. Misty blanched. Going into the hive sounds, she muttered, repeating herself as she shuddered. We can't distract them, Ash continued, standing to pace back and forth as he thought. The guards would just wake the whole hive, and they'd swarm again. I can't attack them, I'd have the same problem, the best I could do is try stealth. Samurai nodded in agreement. A one-man stealth operation sounds best, he agreed. I offer you my help. You are a skilled trainer, and you use more than base instincts. You have earned my respect. Ash stared at Samurai in shock for a moment before nodding to him. Thank you, he said in gratitude, turning to Misty. Are you coming? He asked. Misty visibly paled. What, out there? At night? Oh, the big hive of vicious territorial bugs. Ash shrugged. You don't have to, he relented. Just thought I'd ask. Misty shook her head violently. Nope, no thank you. That is not how I'm facing my fear. Ash nodded. Fair enough, he agreed, glancing at Team Rocket and thought. You can stay here with them, then. If they try anything. Misty looked to Team Rocket and thought, and her expression turned dark. I got it. James gulped. Jesse. I'm scared. Jesse nodded quietly. I know, James. I know. As night fell on Viridian Forest, Ash prepared for the mission ahead of him. His backpack lay on the table in Samurai's hut. He took only 3 Pokeballs with him, Pikachus, Metapods, and an empty third Pokeball in case of emergency. In lieu of his regular outfit, Ash had instead donned Saint his black t-shirt and a pair of black sweatpants. The dark colors, in theory, would cause the Beedrill to pass right over him. There wasn't much he could do for Pikachu's vibrant yellow fur, but his trusted partner refused to stay behind. Instead, Pikachu would stay low, hiding under the denser brush of the forest floor and only attacking if absolutely necessary. Ash looked up as Samurai approached from a back room, holding a rolled package out to him. Take it, the younger trainer said stoically. It will help in an emergency. Ash nodded his thanks and took the package silently, unrolling it to find a chest piece not unlike Samurai's own, colored jet black. He looked up in surprise. It will not do much when faced with a Beedrill's charge, Samurai explained, rapping his knuckles against his own chest piece dully. But it will be better than nothing. If nothing else, it will give you a few more precious seconds to react. Ash stared at Samurai in disbelief before nodding grimly. He was right, if this went south, Ash's journey would end before he earned even a single badge. He wouldn't let that happen. Turning to the door, Ash blinked as he spotted Misty stood at the window. She wasn't looking at him. But something about her told Ash she was worried. Hey, he called, drawing the redhead's attention. He flashed her a confident smile. We'll be back soon, Kay. Don't wait up. Misty stared at him for a moment before chuckling. Just come back in one piece, alright. She replied. I don't wanna have to take care of all your Pokémon for you. As if you could, Ash teased as he opened the door. Wish us luck. Misty waited until Ash and Samurai had left, the door closing softly behind them, before her face fell. Good luck, she muttered softly as she watched the duo disappear into the darkened brush of the woods. Behind her, Team Rocket watched in silence. After a moment, Jesse leant in close to James and Meowth, who had been rebound and his paws trapped in an old pair of oven mitts to nullify his claws as an issue. Wait for her to fall asleep, Jesse muttered. Then we make a break for it. But we're still tied up, James pointed out. And Meowth's claws can't cut us free anymore. I've been declawed, Nyarth. Shish, Jesse hissed, glancing up to make sure Misty hadn't noticed them, but the redhead was still staring out of the window. I'm an og. Ed to get my hands out a while ago, I keep a nail file handy, she explained, seeing the question coming before James could voice it. I'll get you both out and then we run. James and Meowth both nodded. Got it, they replied in unison. Samurai held his hand up, and Ash halted. He had let Samurai take the lead, as the younger trainer knew the forest well, and had led them straight to the hive, making sure they weren't spotted. Pikachu had broken off from the two a few feet back, circling around to another point surrounding the hive, ready to charge in and distract the Beedrill as best it could if things went south. Ash reminded himself that Pikachu was very fast on its feet, and small enough to hide if it needed to. He had to have faith his partner would be okay. Samurai crouched low, prompting Ash to do the same as a Beedrill buzzed past. Another signal from Samurai and the crept forward, always sticking close to the brush, ready to hide. Metapod should be under that tree, Samurai whispered, pointing to a large oak tree under which Ash could see a number of shapes hanging from threads, swaying gently in the night's breeze. Ash nodded. Got it, he replied, moving to creep Fu. RTHER along the brush as Samurai held position. Better that they split up now. If the Beedrill were alerted, they could split their attention more this way. Ash waited for a moment, watching as enough. Our guard buzzed past and holding his breath as it seemed to turn towards him before moving on. He sighed in relief, taking a careful look around before rushing across the clearing in front of him, keeping low. He slowed as he approached the tree, glancing to the canopy above and spotting the many sleeping Beedrill above him, with a great number of Kakuna dangling at varying heights from the many branches. Swallowing the lump in his throat, Ash carefully crept under the canopy, keeping himself low to the ground to avoid the few low-hanging Kakuna. The last thing he wanted now was to disturb the sleeping Chrysalis. Every so often, the young trainer paused, looking around carefully for the telltale green of his Pokémon among all the yellow shells. Eventually, to his great relief, Ash managed to spot a glimpse of green closer to the trunk of the tree. Makes sense, he muttered. The more important ones would be kept further from the edge. Ash took a deep breath, steeling his resolve as he progressed further. Closer and closer he crept, keeping his eyes peeled for any passing Beedrill guards and freezing whenever the canopy above him rustled. Finally, Ash came to a stop beneath the branch where Metapod hung. Metapod, he called quietly, trying to reach for his Pokémon. Metapod, come on, let's go. Slowly, Metapod seemed to respond, perhaps waking up if the late hour said anything. Ash smiled as a wave of joy seemed to wash over his Pokémon and it swung on its thread, the branch above bowing and creaking loudly. Ash froze, his eyes wide, as a buzzing noise began above them. Then, to the left, another. Another to the right. Slowly, the buzzing rose in volume, coming from all sides as the Beedrill hive rose from their dormant slumber. Metapod dropped suddenly then, catching Ash off guard as the trainer let out a grunt of effort and stumbled back. He looked up in fear as the Kakuna directly next to where Metapod had hung swung violently, the sudden loss of weight sending its branch rattling in recoil. He blinked at the sight of the yellow chrysalis, considerably larger than those around it with a noticeable red marking upon the forehead, between its eyes. Ash blanched. The princess, he muttered in realization, turning around slowly as the buzzing rose to an angry swarm. A crack of lightning rose in the distance, and part of the hive seemed to dart off towards it. Loud yelling and the clash of metal against Stinger drew another good portion away. Pikachu and Samurai had distracted some, but a good number were still descending from the canopy towards Ash. All right then, Ash grumbled irritably. So close, bring it on then. Ash struck fast, leaping up to strike the first Beedrill before it had completely shaken off its slumber and sending the human-sized hornet crashing to the ground on its back, where it flailed in panic. The next fell similarly, and Ash kicked it away with all his might. I'm not afraid of you. He yelled confidently, hoping to intimidate the insectoid Pokémon. You took my friend, and I'm taking him back. I am Ash Ketchum, and I will defeat you all. The hive was awake now, Beedrill dropping from the branches to hover around him menacingly. Ash backed up slightly, keeping the tree trunk to his back and Metapod behind his legs. Metapod, harden, Ash commanded. As much as you can. Don't stop, alright, and stay behind me. The Kakuna princess was still swinging above him, almost counting a beat as the Beedrill began their swarm. At least 10 of the hostile insects buzzed around him in a rapid circle, their wings droning out the sounds of battle waging elsewhere. The first dove, blindingly fast, and Ash threw himself aside with barely a second to spare as it brushed past him. The stinger lance crashed into the tree behind him, tearing a chunk of bark from the formidable oak. Ash gulped nervously, ducking under another assault. Suddenly I'm less confident, he muttered, trying and failing to keep track of all the Beedrill. One after another dove at him, and Ash felt himself losing energy as he threw himself this way and that to avoid them, at one point rolling along the grass as one pursued him, jabbing its stingers into the earth with powerful thrusts. Back off, he cried eventually, lashing out with a kick to the insect's face that sent it flailing back when he caught the antennae with his foot. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing a stone and hurling it as hard as he could to catch another between the eyes as it dove for him, sending it into the ground. I can't keep this up, Ash panted, backing up in front of Metapod again. Metapod, get into your Pokeball. I can at least throw you to safety. Metapod stared up at its trainer in shock as Ash held the Pokeball out before standing on its point defiantly. Metapod, it cried out, spitting a thread of string shot at a Beedrill that had tried to blindside Ash and dragging it into the earth. Ash blinked. Metapod, he muttered, blinking tears from his eyes. All right then, we fight together, he declared, raising his fists as his resolve hardened. Watch my back and I'll watch yours. As Ash and Metapod took on the Beedrill that seemed to keep coming for them. Two joining the attack for every one they managed to defeat, neither noticed the swinging Kakuna above them watching curiously. The human was familiar. Despite her lack of sight, she could feel the kindness radiating off of him. Another Beedrill dove for Ash, aiming for his blind spot with both of its forestingers ready to strike. No, Metapod leapt up, putting everything it had into its foot, as it rose to intercept one of the stingers. The hardened shell cracked under the force of the impact, snapping the Beedrill's stinger in two in return. Kakuna swung itself from its branch, releasing the thread suspending it and flying into the path of Beedrill's strike. The hardened shell cracked under the force of the impact, snapping the Beedrill's stinger in two in return. As spun around at the sound, gasping in shock at the sight, the Beedrill had already turned and fled, the swarm backing off for a moment in alarm. But Metapod, and the Kakuna princess, had fallen to the ground. Great cracks in their chrysalis, as the broken stingers fell to the ground. Ash dropped to his knees, scooping both into his arms slowly in disbelief. You, he began, tears forming in his eyes. You saved me, both of you, why? He finally asked, his body shaking as sobs racked his form. Why would you do that? I was meant to protect you, Metapod. And Kakuna, why? These are your people, why help me? Ash closed his eyes, weeping openly for the two Pokémon in his arms. The Beedrill did not attack, seeming hesitant until another, much larger Beedrill descended to join them. Her body colored a cool minty green in stark contrast to the regular yellow. As Ash wept, he failed to notice the light glowing from within the two chrysalis in his arms, growing brighter and brighter until the trainer had to blink the spots from his eyes as he backed off. Metapod rolled away from Ash's arms. With the crack in its body facing the sky, a bright white light shone from within, framing the emergence of two large, delicate butterfly wings as they unfurled, flapping gently as the rest of the body rose from within. Butterfree flapped into the air, crying out in defiance of its injury despite the great red scar across its abdomen. Kakuna rolled away from Ash's arms. With the crack in its body facing the sky, a bright white light shone from within, framing the emergence of four sheer thin hornet wings that buzzed rapidly, pulling the rest of the body from within. Beedrill rose into the air, buzzing angrily despite the great red scar across its abdomen. Ash blinked in shock. He muttered, slowly rising to his feet as he took the sight in. You evolved. Both of you. That's amazing. The buzzing of the swarm began to build again, and Ash swallowed nervously. Okay, not the time. Celebrate later. The remaining swarm of Beedrill began closing in, led by the new arrival of the much larger, green-colored Beedrill that Ash realized nervously could only be their queen. Butterfree rose above him in defiance, causing the Beedrill a moment's pause before they seemed to reason that they outnumbered Butterfree too greatly for the lone butterfly Pokémon to be a threat. To Ash's shock, the Princess Beedrill buzzed in front of him, stingers held out to her sides as she blocked the queen's advance. The trainer watched in confused awe as a conversation seemed to carry out in front of him between the queen and the princess through a series of buzzes and twitches of their abdomens. Just as he felt the tension in the air was ready to burst, Ash watched as the hive backed off, letting out the breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The queen gave one last buzz of warning before returning to the canopy, her hive following behind soon after. Ash gulped as the princess turned to face him, taking in the jewel-like marking on her head and the red scar across her chest. Thank you, he breathed, giving a soft smile. He blinked as the Beedrill buzzed closer, lowering her head as she gently prodded his arm with the blunt side of her stinger. Wait, are you that Weedle? Beedrill buzzed happily in response and Ash chuckled. Wow, Guess you grew pretty quickly, huh? He asked, cautiously reaching up to pet the princess and smiling as she nuzzled into his hand. Thank you for helping us. I'm not sure if we would have survived otherwise. He laughed. Get as Butterfree let off an indignant cry. Yeah, thanks to you too, Butterfree. Hey, we should probably go. Thank you again. As he moved to leave the clearing, hoping to get as far from the hive as he could before the queen changed her mind, Ash blinked as a buzzing noise seemed to follow him. He turned around, seeing the Beedrill princess following behind him. Shouldn't you get back to your hive? He asked in confusion, only becoming more confused when the question seemed to sadden Beedrill. What's wrong? Ash watched Beedrill for a moment as it hovered in the air before him, staring back, before blinking in realization. You can't, can you? He asked, and Beedrill shook her head. Did the queen kick you out? A nod. Ash thought for a moment before smiling to himself. He held out the spare Pokeball he had brought along. Then come with me, he said simply, giving a warm, inviting smile. He had to laugh when Beedrill buzzed happily, flying a circuit around him before diving in to tap her head to the Pokeball. It didn't even shake before chiming a successful capture. And that makes 5, Ash chuckled, tucking the Pokeball into his pocket and taking a moment to call Butterfree back into its ball too. Get some rest, he instructed. It's been a long night. That it has, Samurai mused, approaching from the brush as he sheathed his blade. Pikachu followed closely behind, looking worn out. I take it the mission was a success. Ash chuckled. And then some, he answered cryptically. Come on, I'll explain at the cabin. The next morning, following a hearty breakfast and a brief conversation explaining the events of the night before among the group, Samurai led the duo to the end of the forest path. I still can't believe you caught another bug. Misty sighed dramatically. Ash chuckled and shrugged lamely. I warned you, he said simply, laughing at Misty's put-out expression. And what about you? I thought you were meant to watch Team Rocket. Misty rolled her eyes. Well, I am sorry that after everything that happened, I fell asleep. She shot back. How was I meant to know they'd get out? Samurai chuckled, clearing his throat to gain their attention as the treeline opened up, revealing the stretching path ahead and the first few buildings of Pewter City in the distance. We are here, he said, smiling at the duo. This is where we part ways. Ash and Misty fell silent, smiling sadly. Ash held his hand out, taking Samurai's and shaking it firmly before Misty stepped in to hug the younger trainer goodbye. You could always come with us, Ash offered. There's always room for another friend. That's right, Misty agreed. Samurai smiled, but shook his head. No, thank you. Somebody must remain in the woods, if only to warn travelers of the Beedrill hive. Both for their safety, and the Beedrill's protection. He paused, smirking at Ash. Besides, I have my own new Pokémon to train up now. Ash blinked. You caught a Beedrill too? He asked in surprise, before grinning. That's so cool. Be sure to train it up strong, okay? Samurai grinned. Of course, he agreed. I look forward to the day we may battle again. Misty chuckled to herself, shaking her head. Boys and their bugs, she muttered, pushing Ash's shoulder teasingly. Come on, we should try and get to Pewter before dark. Ash nodded, giving Samurai one more smile. Stay safe, Samurai, he called as they made their way down the path. Ash unsheathed his sword, raising it in a salute. Farewell, Ash and Misty. May we meet again. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you all are enjoyed this video. If you do, please leave a like, share and subscribe. Also don't forget to support author of this fanfic. So let's end this video here. Until then, see you in next video.